what can the West learn from the global South, especially Africa, in terms of banking? Which was normally you're saying, what can the global South learn from the West? But this is actually the other way around. Conversations like this remind you that we are humans, we are fallible. One of our superpowers, though, is community.
Whatever it is you don't like about the world, become the thing that you would rather it be. Not that you're going to save the world doing that alone, but if everyone adopts that philosophy over a long enough period of time, I mean, that's how you do it.
Love, true love, is actually the giving of that feeling to someone else. It's not the receiving, it's the giving. And with the expectation of nothing in return. And so Fedi combines the most fundamental human technology of community with freedom technologies like Bitcoin, like Lightning, like eCash to level up humanity. That's what leads to something magical happening.
That's so cool. I mean, you're working on frontiers of human freedom from multiple angles, basically.
You don't get out much.
I seriously don't. I work at home. I have an office out here. We eat at home almost exclusively. We've been here for almost a year. We've been out to eat 3 or 4 times. We go to the gym and the beach. That's it.
The beach here, or?
Yeah, we have a beach. We're on an island. So we have beaches
just a beach all around the island. Okay.
5 minutes. There's multiple beaches all around here. And that's it. Travel a little bit as possible.
Well, that sounds like a great life.
Good life.
It sounds like a great life. I mean, I'm very blessed to be doing what I'm doing, but I wouldn't say wish, but I do think about being able to enjoy more of Lisbon. When I'm there, I try to enjoy as much as possible.
Yeah.
But I would like to enjoy it.
You're on the road a lot, from what I recall.
A lot. So this is the beginning again. I had a period of, I think it was 7 whole weeks, actually 8 weeks, where I only traveled that I've just finished yesterday as I flew here, and I only traveled for I think 4 days, which for me 4 days out of 8 weeks is basically I'm not traveling.
Wow.
You know? And that's 4 days in 3 places though.
Yeah.
Like one day and 2 days, but that's basically not traveling. So that felt great to be mostly in Lisbon, where I could arrange to meet someone one week and say, let's meet next week.
Yeah.
And I'll still be.
Yeah.
But now that's going to change. I think I'm traveling to here. I fly back for one night and then I travel again. And I think in the next 3 months, I've calculated I'll be in Lisbon for about 3 weeks.
In the next 3 months?
Over the next 3 months. That will be 2 days here, 2 days there. I will be traveling, I think it's to about 12 or 13 places, maybe 14 places in the 3 months.
Is that your normal span of a year that you're on the road 75% of the time, roughly at home 25%?
No, it's exactly 49.99% of the time because I have to be. So last year I was in Portugal for 183 days and I have to be there for 183 days.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of cancel certain trips at the end to meet that quota. But otherwise I would... so
very precise, very intentional.
Because I could travel more. I mean, the nature of what we do, if you think about it, if we're doing advocacy, we're doing that to trying to explain to policymakers and legislators why there are people in the world who need to have privacy. For example, human rights defenders. Not just they want it. We believe in everybody should want it, but there are people, and everybody, I believe, needs it. But some people don't understand that.
Not until they are in the situation.
But they all understand why someone who is trying to provide peaceful opposition against a authoritarian regime would preferably have privacy of their money and privacy of their communication. And if they don't, they could find themselves imprisoned, tortured,
Yeah.
or worse. And so then we asked them, well, how can they achieve that? And the answer is there aren't solutions around. So you start with that education, and that tends to be in places like Brussels and Washington.
Is that then the purpose of most of your travel is Bitcoin?
No, that's just one
advocacy?
part. There's like
Okay.
4 parts. That's a small part. I'd love to do more of that. Then there's a part where you have to talk to investors and so on, just to keep them updated. And then the third part is you go to conferences where people tend to see me and just explain what we're doing, update, and learn and connect. But the biggest part, and the bit that people don't see, is I have to travel and see certain communities, especially at early stages, to see how they're doing. And that tends to cover my travel in the global south, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa. At some point, I would like to be doing more in the Middle East, maybe even post-Soviet Europe, although some of these areas are more difficult to travel than others.
Sure.
So the end result is you're traveling to basically every continent, including the last few years, including the Arctic as well. I mean, it's pretty much every continent, every year, a lot of travel. So yeah, to come to Miami for one day and fly back is it's actually better than last year. I did, I would go to. I remember doing an event which was Bitcoin with AI, which was last year or the year before, and I flew from Lisbon to LA for one day and then flew back. Wow. And then the following week, I was traveling to Asia. So it's a lot of travel.
I remember, I think this was at the MicroStrategy event last year. Was that
Orlando.
the year you gave the Star Wars themed
entry,
Okay. Because it was May 4th, I guess.
It was May the 4th.
May the 4th.
It was May the 4th. Right, so we had to we all asked to choose a song to come into, and I just thought, well, my name is Obi, and it's May the 4th, so it's got to be the Star Wars theme. Yeah,
that was so good.
Yeah.
So the travel to the global south, then that's you focusing on customers in a way for Fedi.
Yeah, that's, and also just outside of Fedi, I've been fortunate enough to, just as a background, I've been in the Bitcoin space for a while. I had a Bitcoin exchange. And after selling that exchange, I was at a moment of reflection. I had the opportunity to be able to reflect, but I also realized there were other ways I could contribute. And one was I put my name forward to go on the board of an organization called B Trust. And this was a fund set up by Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z. Well, not set. They provided the capital, which was 500 BTC.
I remember
Bitcoin.
This.
And I was selected of one of 4 to be on the board of that. And they fund Bitcoin open source engineers, people who want to work on the Bitcoin protocol or related freedom technologies, as we now like to call of them. So Lightning Network and others, and obviously Fedimint and Nostr, and more. So people who want to work on that, but are based in the global south. So they have the brains and skill, but they can't say, well, I'm going to work for free for 3 or 4 years when I could take a job at Google Africa or Meta Africa, and they'll pay me a very hefty salary, which will fund myself and my extended family. We can take that talent and provide them an alternative where we can fund them, so that the Bitcoin community benefits from a greater pool of people. And there's also another organization more recently that I've become a board member of, which is the Reynolds Foundation, but they are based in Costa Rica. So again, that often, and they provide, it's very related to what we do at Fedi and Fedimint. They fund many different philanthropic activities. But one of the most significant is funding any organization that's helping support activities for organizations trying to work to improve freedom in the world. And it's again a very large fund. It's about $500 million towards that. So these are two funds. One is towards increasing the brain trust working on Bitcoin specifically, and the other one is working on in supporting communities that are increasing freedom. So both of those cross with what we're doing at Fedi, because we work with freedom technologies and we support these communities. So this is another way to support both of those. But all of those tend to require also a lot of travel to the global south.
That's so cool. I mean, you're working on the frontiers of human freedom from multiple angles, basically.
Yeah, I sometimes have to sort of, you know, pinch myself because it's when I was in the city of London helping ultra high net worths and individuals and consumers, which is a bit I loved by Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And now I'm, have the chance to work with and support incredible people around the world. So it's extended from what was mainly a UK and European offering, other than our derivatives offering, which was global, to this very global perspective.
So cool. It seems to be somewhat of a common theme that Bitcoin kind of causes people to get into the thing that they're really good at and passionate about. You see a lot of people that get, for instance, on a different level, you see people that get into Bitcoin, quitting their fiat jobs and finding a way to work in Bitcoin. But in your case, you were already working in Bitcoin, but you found a way to do something that is even closer to your heart or your core competencies, perhaps, or perhaps both. Just a better fit for who you are.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that, so when I first heard about Bitcoin, a number of friends shared it with me because I was two things. I was a geek. I studied computer science and cognitive science. So basically trying to make our new robots AI overlords in the University College of London. And this is way back. This is in the mid-1990s was when I was studying. And I also, because of being a child of two worlds, my parents were from Nigeria, but I grew up in the UK and I traveled backwards and forwards between Nigeria and the UK. I was living in the UK, but, 1 or 2 times a year we'd travel back. And you would just see this tale of two worlds where direct cousins, you could see how their paths change. If the cousins who were in the UK or Europe, the cousins who were in the US, the cousins who were in Nigeria, and just because of what became clearer and clearer, economic differences that were out of their control, they would work hard. They were equally ambitious. I would actually say the cousins in Nigeria, the joke is almost everyone is a businessman or a businesswoman, even at 5 years old. They were very hungry, very entrepreneurial, but still so many impediments made it harder for them to succeed for the same or even greater effort. So I became aware of that discrepancy. And as this engineer, I just found that incredibly inefficient for the world because it seemed obvious to me that there were incredibly talented people all around the world. And I do believe that there are certain people, certain individuals who create businesses or opportunities or art or whatever it is that impact the entire world. So, and if we lose out on giving those people opportunities, the whole world loses out. If you don't discover a new Nikola Tesla or a new Henry Ford or whoever it is, we all lose out.
Yeah.
And so that just seemed very, very inefficient and very bad for the world. So that was something I would go on about. And I would also go on about technology. And so when Bitcoin came out, a number of friends, so this is right up Obi's street. It's technology, but it also has this sort of philosophical element.
Yeah.
The world's, the way when I saw it, is the world's first meritocratic money.
Yes.
And that anybody can have equal access to it, and then you can decide to do with it what you want, just as long as you're aware of it, and we can build tools to allow you to transact it. So I got into it at that point, and I got excited about it for that reason. I read the white paper. It's only 7 pages long, and it blew my mind. However, I wasn't convinced at that time when I first heard about it that it would be able to withstand, it would be censorship resistant. It would be able to withstand the pressures of government and so on. So I bought a little and forgot about it. Fast forward a couple of years, and my soon-to-be co-founder of the time approached me to suggest that we set up this Bitcoin startup. I'd previously invested, because I was doing well from my previous businesses and careers, that we start a Bitcoin exchange. Me as the CTO initially. After a year, I became the CEO, because I was a CTO for 15 years before being a CEO. And I thought, well, Bitcoin, is it still around? I looked, and my Bitcoin's worth significantly more than when I bought it in 2011. And I realized, okay, it was still great technology. It was still had the same powerful philosophy about its potential to change the world, but it also has staying power. So, and also the market was really early. We just had a very simple idea. Let's make a way for people to buy and sell and trade Bitcoin in the UK that wasn't rubbish, that was just reliable and just worked. And that seems like a very low bar now, but back in 2013, with Mount Gox about to explode and so on,
it didn't exist in 2013.
It didn't really exist.
Really, anywhere in the world.
It didn't really exist. And not for actually a few years after. There were names now that some of them are very big, but even then, there were still just a few people punching above their weight at that time around the world. So we set that up. And in my mind, I had this vision that it could have incredible potential. In fact, the first day I started, I used to keep copious notes, and I had this notepad, and the first page was thinking about was a diagram of how Bitcoin could be used to help with remittance or flows of funds to Nigeria, because I know from the experience of my family that it can be incredibly expensive. There's a lot of people who, at the time, took a lot of advantage of people in terms of remittance. So it just seemed obvious that this could be a powerful alternative. And also I was just very interested in, again, closer to home being, in this case, the UK, ways to make just the every man, every woman be easily and simply buy Bitcoin. But you started in the business, you went through many ups and downs, and you initially start with some of the largest customers to become profitable. And so fast forward, it was nearly 8 years, and we were a profitable business. But and although we insisted, and I managed to maintain a significant set of features and services for the average consumer in the UK and beyond, it was just a lot harder to deal with those users. The regulations make it easier to deal with high net worths, offer them more sophisticated, more profitable products. And so, as is the way with most exchanges, the vast majority of your revenues comes from, it's not the 80-20 rule, actually, when it comes to exchanges, where 80% of your revenue comes from 20%.
Yeah.
It's more like the 99-1 rule, where 99% of your revenue comes from 1% of your users.
Wow.
And so,
due to regulatory stuff predominantly.
I think that's part of it, because some of the most interesting products that you can offer are difficult to offer to consumers, so they just get excluded from it. So that's part of it. It exacerbates it. But there's also a general trend. It's easier to sell to a larger client first. But then what you want to do is take a model where you sell to a larger client, but use that to help fund and drive down so you can offer products and services
Yes.
of value to a wider and wider group of people.
Yeah, kind of the
And that
Tesla strategy, right?
Tesla
Yeah.
is a common it's a company that's commonly cited to perform that
Yeah.
strategy. But this is where that strategy can sometimes be thwarted by regulations making it too expensive. So one thing I was seeing, and because we tried multiple times to push down, even though it was not so profitable in terms of money, it was profitable in terms of merit, in terms of a sense of purpose and passion and my original objectives. But I could see that regulation was increasing over time, and that was understandable. But if you extrapolated, then it became obvious to me, and 4 or 5, actually now, it would be actually over 5 years ago. I started writing about it 5 years ago. It became obvious to me that at some point the cost would become prohibitive for normal users to be able to access. And when I mean to be able to access, that means to buy, hold, and withdraw their Bitcoin from these exchanges. Because if I can just buy and just hold, then the question is, do you actually have it?
Right.
And if you don't have that freedom to move it to an area where, or to a mechanism or to a place where you feel that you have some sovereignty over it, do you actually have it? Now, different people can argue differently, and they can nowadays try to convince themselves that's a separate thing. But for me, that felt like it was an inevitable clash that was going to come. And if I extrapolated, like, my gut feelings, it would take about 5 years. And that was around 2019. And it's now 2020. It was 2018, and I started talking about it in 2018, 2019. And my expectation was it was 2023 onwards is where we're going to start seeing that. And I think history has shown that's being correct.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely, there were even, like, when PayPal launched their Bitcoin crypto product, initially they weren't letting users withdraw their Bitcoin. And so you saw, I guess self-custody was not being a priority for some of these traditional financial companies that were implementing it, which makes sense, but it is very counter to the Bitcoin ethos.
The thing that you realize when you run an exchange, and I imagine it's the same for many other financial institutions, is where you custody is where you transact. So it's a bit like razor blades versus razors. The classic model is to sell the razor blades at a very low cost. And then once people are hooked on your razor blades, there's only one razor that fits, but they're consumables, and you make your money from the razor blades. And the same with exchanges. Whatever they say, they will try to find mechanisms, sometimes explicit, sometimes implicit, to convince you to stay and custody with them. And then once they've done that, they will then find mechanisms to convince you to trade.
Yeah, I was shocked the other day because I hadn't been a Coinbase user since like 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And my wife was like, she's like, oh, I have this Coinbase account still set up. And she showed me the app. And it was a complete labyrinth, like complete maze, shitcoin casino maze. Couldn't even find Bitcoin inside the app at all. And it started to occur to me, like, this is all intentionally designed to keep you lost and trading.
They're a company that's worth, over $1 billion now.
Yeah.
Well over. I don't know the value. I don't really
I'm
follow
not
it
sure
too
either.
much. But they have the resources to make a simple, clean design.
Yes.
If they wanted to. So if they're not doing that, that means they have a design that's designed to balance the needs of the customer with their own economic needs.
Exactly.
And so showing you price charts and giving you multiple different things to trade and giving you news where the news explains how a major release has happened, or this the next big thing, or so on.
Yes, exactly.
This keeps you, maybe this is the one I should go with. Oh, actually, no, maybe it's that. Maybe it's this, and maybe it's that. And each time that equals a trade, and they will earn money from that.
Yeah, they're just creating these little mini hype cycles or narratives around all these meme coins, shit coins, whatever you want to call them. and just trying to keep people trading in and out of them, right? And then that's
I mean, that's how they make.
where they generate all their fees.
That's how they generate, and that or staking. But again,
Yeah.
they want you to do stuff which they can
Yeah.
then charge a fee for. Now, there's no problem with charging a fee. You're
Sure.
making a viable business, but there are natural things that people want to
Yeah.
do, which will cause them to transact,
Yeah.
which are beneficial to them. For example, using money as a medium of exchange to buy things. There's a huge amount of transaction volume that happens on buying and acquiring goods and services that you need to live, and charging a small fee for facilitating that in a way which is lower cost and provides benefits to the user that they find of value. So, i.e., low cost, low friction, maybe increased privacy, increased sensitivity resistance, whatever it is that you value, but allowing you to go off and transact, or more places or venues where you're able to transact, you can charge a fee for that.
Yeah.
And also trade, and the ability to trade is very valuable at certain points. You may want to hedge risk. You may want to, there may be many reasons why you want to trade. But so having a venue where you can do that is fine, and charging for that service. It's when you then go on top of that and use design and UX to you use what are called dark patterns, specifically designed to make people do stuff which goes beyond what they would normally do, but actually is trying to make them do things which are actually detrimental to them, but beneficial to you, which is where it gets a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, the line is definitely blurry, because to some extent you're like, well, whatever. They just designed their app however they're going to design their app. If you don't like it as a user, then you can just go use a different app. But the analogy is, for me, is casinos, right? Because it is a casino, basically. And casinos are often designed to not show you, like, you can't tell if it's daylight outside. So like people don't know what time of day it is. I lived in Vegas for 5 years, which is why I know a few of these little things. They pump a certain smell into the casino that like makes people more relaxed and more open to pulling that lever for an extra hour or whatever it may be. There's all these little gimmicky things built into the slot machines themselves that are psychologically designed to sort of get you to want to hit that dopamine button one more time. So it's like, I don't like, where do you draw the line? I'm not really sure, but looking at that app, I just felt scammy. I'm like, you can't even find Bitcoin. You can't buy Bitcoin. You can't withdraw Bitcoin. When she was trying to like move from to swap one thing for another thing, it was saying she needed Ethereum for gas. And like, it wasn't clear how you buy that in the app either. So it's like, for a beginner that doesn't know about this stuff, it was just like a total maze. And I was like, the only reason this would be like this is because they want to keep you on the platform, swapping in and out of stuff.
They want to keep you swapping and trading. And you asked a good question, because a lot of people will think, well, you have choice, you have free will, and so on. And you could always move to something else. Well, the question is, can you move to something else? Because if all of the options are basically the same thing, then you don't necessarily have easy options. Also, again, this is where the regulatory factors come into play. It can lead to this sort of concentration in a few very centralized, anointed services, and everything else that comes in from the outside has this disadvantage because it's unregulated, and the regulators there's a lot of effort into basically stating that these things you should steer away from, and steering them towards the regulated ones. The regulated ones have thousands of choices with leverage and staking and so on. It becomes, for someone who's non-technical or hasn't had the defenses of knowledge put in front of them, very, 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 very challenging. And sometimes people have difficulty empathizing because they've gone through the pain. Yeah. Difficulty empathizing what the situation is for someone coming in new. Yes. And also they're thinking about the situation when it was new for them. Right. 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But it's way more difficult now because people are 4 years more sophisticated, 4 years more capitalized, 4 years more brand recognition. So it's way harder now for someone new to be able to discern than for someone 4 years ago or someone 8 years ago or even further.
Yeah, and it is, again, it's still murky to me because I could see someone, from Coinbase sitting here saying, "Oh no, it's just consumer preference." Like we A/B test all these things, and whatever it is they prefer, that's what we design and put into the app or put onto the platform. And I don't know. It's not exactly.
It's not black and white.
There's no violation of free market principles occurring here, but there is some of this subtle psychological manipulation at the edges where you're like, I don't know, it doesn't feel above board.
It's a hard one because there's a certain line. If someone goes off and just steals money from you directly,
right,
that's a violation of free market principles. But if they lead you towards
more the con artistry
and they pump gas into your nostrils that makes you more suggestive, but it's a legal gas, and if they could take it to the limit but not go over the line. But I think the key insight for me is that if you can, there aren't really compelling alternatives, or they weren't. All the alternatives, I mean, you have slight differences, some slight philosophical differences between one exchange and others. Some are more Bitcoin aligned than others, and they try hard, but they're all within the same framework. And so my insight was that you've just got to offer the consumer other offerings. So this is, on one hand, it's a threat to consumers. The sort of the consumer who hasn't yet gone through the pain and knowledge acquisition. But also it's an opportunity for entrepreneurs. If we can offer an offering which is fundamentally still a commercial offering, still designed to make money, but fundamentally has properties and a value proposition that these others can't match. And especially once they've made the 2-footed tackle of no return, as my school football teacher would say, down one path, it's very hard for them to U-turn. You can find ground that they haven't covered, don't want to cover, and can't cover, and carve out something for that. And you see that with a number of Bitcoin companies. They provide differentiated offerings, but I think that's actually, the field of offerings is way bigger than most people believe.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So as Coinbase went down the shitcoin casino path, it leaves in its wake a lot of opportunity for Bitcoin only exchanges or Bitcoin focused offerings.
That's one area which you can see examples of. I think there's actually a set of offerings which are just very differentiated from these, which are even bigger than that opportunity.
The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okeffarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okeffarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, And even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. We've covered a lot here, but we haven't even talked about the thing we're here to talk about,
No problem.
which is the thing you've been working on for years. And I guess we should start with a question to just distinguish these two things, because they're often confused, which are your company Fedi,
Yeah.
and then the protocol Fedimint.
Yeah.
Can you, I guess, whatever approach you'd like to take, but like, how did you, I guess you discovered the Fedimint protocol first before founding Fedi. What are these things? How are they different? And how did you get to where you are today?
And I will split Fedi as well, because Fedi is the company, Fedi Inc. And we also have an app, which is also called Fedi, the Fedi app.
Got it.
So there will be a further splitting there of the cell to create the new life form. So Fedimint is a protocol, just like Bitcoin is a protocol, and HTTP, which is used for web browsing, is a protocol. And obviously the Lightning Network has a protocol as well. Whereas Bitcoin is a protocol for hard money, limited fixed supply, one of the most decentralized things we've ever created, if not the most decentralized, able to store value and transact, but it is slow. It's not perfectly private, but it's still pretty good in terms of privacy and pretty fast, a dozen transactions a second.
And those are purposeful trade-offs for the first two things you said, right? You need the imperfect privacy for fixed supply and et cetera.
Exactly. The realization was that the most important thing to get right is to have something that's decentralized and censorship resistant. And then from that, you can build on. And so that's what Bitcoin gives you. Lightning then is a layer on top, which allows you to send these Bitcoin around at lightning fast speed. So very fast for lower cost. It also improves privacy as well, as well. But it has limitations. It's in terms of how many different people can be using the Lightning Network at any given one time, or not people, particular, we call them Lightning nodes, can be using the Lightning Network at any given time. But for that, within that constraint, and that constraint is millions, potentially tens of millions right now, and in future that could be greater. They have the potential to send value around between themselves at incredible speeds at very low cost. What Fedimint is a protocol to be able to take Bitcoin and scale the custody of it, while Lightning scales the transaction rate for it. Fedimint scales the custody, and it also, as a side effect, that scales privacy and also it scales transactions as well. But think about it as, to begin with, this community custody scaling mechanism. It was invented by my co-founder of Fedi, and he invented it before I met him. And actually, the first organization to discover his idea was Blockstream, and they were the first to sponsor him to work on this. And the idea uses a protocol called eCash. And eCash is the first digital money.
Pre-Bitcoin.
It was pre-Bitcoin by 25 years.
Yeah.
Pre-Bitcoin.
Wow.
1983, David Chow, who's this famous cryptographer, came up with this idea to be able, it's a very simple cryptographic primitive, but it allows you to sign something without knowing what the thing is that you sign. So imagine you get an envelope with a piece of paper in it, and then you have one of this sort of the photocopy paper that you put inside, that when you write on it, it imprints on the paper underneath. And you can create the software equivalent of that, where you can have an envelope with, let's say, a picture of your pet. You put this carbon copy paper inside, and then on the outside of the envelope you sign, and then you open the envelope, take out the photo. You'll still have your photo, but now your signature will be on the photo. But if you'd given me that envelope with the picture of your dog in it, and with the carbon paper on top inside the envelope, and then give me the envelope, and I signed it and gave it back to you, I know I signed whatever's in that envelope, but I don't know what was in the envelope. Was it a picture of your dog, a picture of your cat, a random string of numbers? I don't know what it is. And so that cryptographic primitive was called blinded signing, blinded signatures. Okay, so he invented this idea, but he realized, well, what would be something that would be worth me signing? And then he realized, well, imagine if these were actual notes, like each one represented like a banknote. And you would go to, let's say, to a fairground, and you go to the entrance of the fairground, and you give them money, and they give you tokens to use around the fairground to use on any ride you want to use. Well, once you've got those notes, which are basically IOUs that represents the cash that you gave at the entrance to the fairground, you can use them any way you want within the fairground. And once you've received them, they're completely private. You can use them anywhere. You could I could have 20 or 30 of these and hand them out amongst my kids. My kids could lend them or give them to their friends if their friends have run out of these tokens, or they can use them in any rides. If they use them on a machine and they win the jackpot and they could get return back additional tokens. And all of those transactions would happen within the fairground and be private.
Yeah, because they're bearer asset like, basically.
Because it's a bearer asset within the confines of the fairground. And also there's no transaction limit because they're all peer-to-peer. There might be a limit to how many transactions you could do with your cash at the entrance, but once you're within this fairground, there is no speed limit to how many transactions you can perform because they're happening directly from person to person. It's basically, there's no limit. How the faster you're only limited to how fast you can transact. So you can transact fast and you get privacy. There's only one downside. At the point that you got these tokens and the point you redeemed, the person who's running the kiosk and holding the money is aware of who they gave a given token to and who they're redeeming it for.
Right.
It's still pretty private, but you've lost a little bit.
Right.
How do you solve that? Well, instead, the user comes along with an envelope one envelope per note that they want. And they'll say like, I want $20, and they come along with 20 different envelopes, each containing just a random unique number to represent a unique note.
Yeah.
And then they give the kiosk $20 plus these 20 envelopes. And the kiosk will take a $1 stamp and will stamp each one of those envelopes, and then return the envelopes to them and keep the $20. Now the person takes the envelopes, opens them out, and takes the notes. And they now have these notes. The kiosk operator at some point might receive back a certain number of notes, and they will check, is my stamp my official stamp on this note? Yes. Okay, then I must have signed it. But they won't know
who it came from.
Gotcha. So the last piece is solved by this one idea of the blinded signatures. And now you have perfect privacy from beginning to the end.
Wow.
It's a very simple system.
Yeah.
And it actually operates, once you have these eCash, in the way when most people first hear about the idea of a digital money, how they intuitively think it should work. It should be like, when I have the money on my phone, it's actually on my phone. It's like different digital notes on my phone. And when I send the money from one person to the other, I'm actually sending notes like I would send notes from my wallet and give it to someone else for them to hold in their wallet. The same exact thing happens with eCash.
Wow.
We all, when we first heard about Bitcoin, we intuitively understand it to work that way. And then we realized, no, it doesn't work that way. And there's a double spend problem, and then there's issues, and then you have the blockchain and so on. And we have to learn a whole new way of thinking about how money works, because the idea behind Bitcoin is so mind-blowing. But eCash is very simple and completely private and scales to without limit, as long as it's within the confines of a given community.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great metaphor, great analogy to make it very simple to understand. This, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like in many ways a central dilemma in Bitcoin, or has been historically. This is probably even the dilemma related to the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash fork, right? That they were trying to make Bitcoin more transactable, ostensibly, by increasing the block size and, overcoming these things. But the path that Bitcoin ended up taking was optimizing for decentralization, fixed supply, censorship resistance at layer 1. And now through things like use of the Fedimint
and Lightning
protocol,
and
Lightning,
so on.
picking up those other transactability features that it lacks at layer 1, like privacy and transaction volume, throughput.
This is an ongoing discussion and dialogue in the Bitcoin community, and to a greater extent in the cryptocurrency community. Basically, every other cryptocurrency has, every other significant one has taken the approach of going for more transaction volume at the base layer, which has a centralizing effect.
Yes.
And Bitcoin has remained the most decentralized blockchain.
Yes.
I'm sure there is some of the 2.7 million blockchains. There might be one that architecturally has, 1 kilobyte blocks and a block every 5 hours to be even more decentralized. But
that's not enough, right? It's not just the design features.
It's also they don't have any significant adoption or history or so on. No one supporting them. So this has reached a level where it's already well over half of all value is stored in Bitcoin. Yes. It's proven that it's succeeded in this, and it's only gaining without any marketing force, without ICO dollars to back it. It's gaining ground against the competition. So it's a settled story now, and we have. But of the ones that are, even take the top 100 blockchains, Bitcoin is by far the most decentralized, and it's taken that approach. But if we want to scale it or improve some of the properties that are the trade-offs from that, i.e. transaction throughput or privacy or simplicity of use, then you have to, by making that choice, you have to scale in layers. And there are different people who have different ideas of how to deal with that. But the most prominent ideas right now are for scaling transaction throughput, you use Lightning. The one that have the most level of support within the Bitcoin community. And more recently for scaling custody and privacy, and also scaling speed of transactions even further, eCash. So we're starting to see this sort of triumvirate of Bitcoin, Lightning, and eCash. And eCash, but the limitations of eCash are that you need some level of trust, because even though you have privacy, you have to trust the kiosk operator. We call it the mint, the person or organization or group of people who you go to, and they will hold your Bitcoin,
right?
And they will then and they will validate your notes, and you don't have to really trust them for that, but what you have to trust them is at the end, when you want to redeem it back to Bitcoin, they still have the Bitcoin, and they're willing to give it to you.
Yeah.
And so there's a trust element there, and that's the trade-off compared to Bitcoin, and also even compared to Lightning. The quid pro quo is that you get cryptographically perfect privacy, and you get this incredible transaction throughput, but you're making that trust trade-off.
Analogy where you're saying it's like going into the fair, right? The fair tokens at the fair. How big can these fairs be in terms of actual people transacting?
So technically, there's no limit. It's more. So there's two things, and it depends on how much you flex the trust. But you still have a challenge that if data, I cannot actually send you information. What I can do is I can take information that I have, copy it, and give you a copy of the information. Whenever you send someone a file, you still have the file, and they now have the file.
This is the double spend problem.
So if the file on my phone is a note, a $1 note that I have validated by the mint saying, whoever comes to me, it's like I believe it's Cinderella. Yes, whoever the shoe fits,
right?
Then they will be the queen and receive all the rewards. Whoever comes to me with a note that I have stamped to say that this is this is worth 1,000 satoshis, for example, I will receive that, and I will look at it and I'll go, okay, I've stamped it. And I will add it to a list of notes that I've now seen and that have been spent. And I will take the 1,000 sats, and you'll also give me instructions of where you want me to send it, a Lightning address, and I'll take that 1,000 sats as the mint and send it on to that address. Now, what happens if I send you that note, one of my notes, for 1,000 sats? That's stamped. You check it, and you can look at this. You can look at the stamp, and you can say, as the recipient, this is a valid note. I know that if I pass it on to the mint, they will give me my money. But what happens if I receive it, and 5 minutes later, the person who sent it to me took their copy and sends it back to the mint to be redeemed?
And they double spend you, basically.
So then I, a week later, go back to the mint and ask to redeem my note. And they will go, nope, can't, because that's already been redeemed. Someone else redeemed that, sir. So I can't give you yours. So you still risk the double spend problem. So what people tend to do normally is they will receive, they will send the eCash to another person directly. That's peer-to-peer. Doesn't have to involve the mint. But the person who receives it is under an incentive to immediately take that note and go back, rush back to the kiosk and say, here's a note. Can you redeem it right now? And by the way, here's some more unsigned eCash. Can you sign, that's blinded. Can you sign that? So basically, it's like going to the bank and asking for fresh new notes.
Right. Got it.
And so people will immediately ask for fresh new notes.
They're passing on, you want to get out of the position of having counterparty risk exposure and get into the position of being the counterparty.
So if you have an internet connection on your phone, the moment you receive your eCash, behind the scenes, it will instantly swap it out.
Got it.
And so there is what that means is though, your transactions that you can swap in and out are, if everybody is doing that, are limited by the number of transactions per second the mint can reissue, number of reissuances it can do. And that comes down to the power of the mint. That being the case, if you in your community have a level of trust, like you're in a village and you know everybody in the village, and you would know also if you went to redeem, you will know which notes failed, and so you'll be able to tie that back to a transaction, and you say, well, who was that transaction with?
Okay,
and I can go up to that person and use social pressure to say, okay, and by the way, the vast majority of people's transactions are local within their community.
Yeah.
So if someone were to effectively steal, you now have proof that they stole, and they may not be able to transact with anybody ever again in that community. So that's a cost.
Yeah.
Imagine if you live in a village and you have to walk 5 kilometers to the nearest next village. And by the way, the word will get out to all neighboring villages. So you might have to walk 30 kilometers to be able to, before anybody would transact with you.
Yeah.
That's a cost for the rest of your life for stealing once. So there is actually a cost. But if you're transacting internationally at a distance with people who you don't know and not part of your family, there is no social cost or to being ostracized. So it's a curly head guy in the Bahamas, in the FTX case, for example. Then you would want to use Lightning. You would want to use, want to use, and if it's a very large value item, then you would have to, because of the limitations of Lightning, use Bitcoin. But if it's within a community context, which is where 80% of transactions happen, where the cost of cheating for that one transaction will be penalized and never being able to transact with anyone again, which will exact an actual physical cost for you forevermore.
Yeah.
And also, not to mention the fact that people can then exact retribution on you because they can do POP, proof of punchability. You will find that just like people's behavior on Twitter is very different to how they talk in real life.
Right.
Because, if you're as obnoxious to someone in real life, there's proof of punch.
Yes, proof of punch.
So people that all of a sudden are much more generous with their language when there's a physical connection. And that's why we forget that these things work. The realization that this works very well in some sort of community context. It doesn't have to be a physical community,
right?
But as long as there is a sense that you're part of a community, there's a cost to being ostracized from a community,
right?
And that's the cost that you can transact. That if you were to cheat, you can be ostracized from the community,
right? So when the probability of being ostracized or exiled or punched is higher because of proximity, then
proximity or in terms of or community proximity. If you're part of a group of people who have a shared interest, and you spend you value being part of the community,
right?
Community is a superpower. It allows us to achieve more through specialization and optimization, and division of labor. So if you are now excluded from that, that's a cost to you.
Yes.
But if you're transacting with a stranger, then there's no cost to you to being excluded from this stranger ever contacting you again.
Does this enable the use of reputational systems?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. And this is where Nostr starts coming, because Nostr is a powerful reputation engine.
Okay.
And we're seeing that for, but this is a whole discussion, but I think this is what's interesting. We're seeing this set of things that work well to provide different elements and that complement each other. So I'm trying to come up with this analogy of, I call it blend, BLEND. So But you have Bitcoin, Lightning, eCash, Nostr, and decentralized tech, other decentralized tech for just
Gotcha.
to catch all. But you're seeing that these things work well. So Nostr provides you a mechanism of broadcasting and discovery. It's like a form of decentralized search.
Yeah.
That's the way I see Nostr.
Okay.
The social networking aspect is just the first app. Social networking is a form of discovery. You want to discover voices, viewpoints, and share yours as well. But reputation is also a form of search. You want to search through other people's reviews of this thing,
right?
And you want to search for people or things that have certain attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're just describing a reputation system. It's like a series of reviews on this subject, and then look at the reviews that this person has got, and then look at the connections that the people who reviewed have compared to you, and the web of trust that relates you to each other. All of those things are needed for a social network, but they can be applied to a list of communities. How are they connected to you? Who do you know who's using that community? How many people have transacted with this merchant?
Mm-hmm.
And how do the merchants and the people who transacted them relate to you? You can use the same mechanism. So it's a decentralized search mechanism, which is important for trust while minimizing, while maximizing privacy. Lightning allows you to send value from one person to another in a privacy-preserving and low-cost way. And eCash allows you to store value as a community. And within that community context, you have a massively increased transaction throughput. If you want to validate every transaction, it's still potentially thousands of transactions per second.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are willing to trust for a little while before reissuing, then your transaction throughput can increase even more.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's so interesting how these different solutions complement one another.
Yeah, it's almost this is where it's almost spooky how they it's sort of this jigsaw, and they slot in, and and they all have their weaknesses and trade-offs.
Sure.
And that's actually part of the beauty. Because often people try to make something, they try to create a solution that has zero trade-offs.
Right, it's not possible.
And logically, it's like creating the perfect human. And you know how the sci-fi ends up when you create the perfect.
Exactly,
it always turns out to be this weird chimera monster, because perfection is not possible.
Exactly.
But we worked, and we should accept that, and then work together as a community, or use technologies that complement each other, have different trade-offs, to lead to a result that's better than that's greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly. And yes, so to your point, it's contingent on the specific aim or use case or goal that the individual using it. So you can't, when you say perfect, like the reason it's impossible is because, well, you can't encompass all possible use cases. It's like trying to turn an ASIC into a general purpose compute chip, right? Like the ASIC is perfect, so to speak, not actually, but it's as good as it can be at doing one thing.
Yep.
Right. But that means you need other things to do other things well, because you're not always just doing the one thing, you do other things. So
I think it's always hard for people to understand this when you're dealing with software, because it's information, it's this concept which you can't see, you can't feel. So and it's the same for me, by the way. And so what I tend to do for myself is to try and think of analogies which are in the physical world. So for example, how can I what would the perfect car look like?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, what's the perfect car? You can say it's Ferrari. Well, but I want to use it to pick up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. A truck. No, I want to pick up more stuff. Okay. Well, the perfect vehicle. Okay, then I'll use a plane or a super tanker. Oh, but I also want it to go 150 miles an hour and corner on a dime. Then that goes back to a Ferrari again. And I also want to be able to do wheelies on it. Well, then that's but but neither they're perfect for the use case, and
Yes.
it's obvious that you cannot make one car or one vehicle for every use case.
Yes.
But when it comes to software, people magically believe that this no longer applies, and I can have software which is super fast, but also super flexible, but also super stable, and has no trade-offs, and could be instantly changed and modified in a second, but it's going to have zero bugs, and there is never a trade-off. There is always a trade-off.
Always.
And a honest engineer or an honest organization would just clearly communicate those trade-offs. So when people are telling you that something has no trade-offs,
be wary.
Be very, very, very wary, because either they are incompetent or
charlatan,
or they're a charlatan, or they're and the incompetent could be accidental.
Sure.
I mean, it could be completely honest, but the fact is, there are always trade-offs, and what I loved about my co-founder and the inventor of Fedimint is he's just almost to his detriment, is such a humble guy. And he is at pains to communicate the weaknesses of this incredible protocol. He's built this insanely powerful protocol, but he spends most of his time talking about its limitations, its issues, its risks, and not hyping up, but hyping down.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the most gifted engineers I've ever worked with. Everybody who's worked with him has the same view, but he's incredibly humble. And that's the thing that gives me confidence that this is a strong protocol that can be used in the fullness of time to be a key part of the ecosystem, to be able to help communities or families, from as small as a family, to answer your previous question, to potentially hundreds of thousands of people per federation, to reliably custody their value and provide them significantly increased privacy, and provide them significantly increased transaction throughput because of that sort of, insane focus on being very, very humble, the whole stay humble, being very humble about what it's capable of, and being really insistent on making sure people are aware of that.
Yeah, keeping you in touch with reality in a way, right? Like this thing I love how Steve Jobs put this a certain way. He said, no matter what design space you're navigating, you're always going to be navigating trade-offs, because there's only certain things electrons can do, certain things plastic can do, et cetera. It's like you encounter the physical limitations. And this is true even with software, which is kind of, again, hard to understand, because when you think software, you think it's just an idea floating around. But no, it actually has to perform on a piece of hardware at the same time. And there are physical limitations or mathematical limitations, even. Like we brought up Bitcoin earlier, but it had, and I don't understand how to explain why this is. I just know it is true. Or I've heard that it's true. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can't have perfect privacy and fixed supply on layer one. Like there's a mathematical trade-off or impossibility there that they just optimize for perfectly fixed supply rather than perfect privacy. Whereas something like Monero makes an opposite trade-off, right? They have more perfect privacy, but you can't audit the total supply.
So if you have perfect privacy, and so people again have a trade-off, and there's spectrums. But if you have perfect privacy, then you won't know who is holding what.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who is holding what, you won't even know how many users you have. So this is to your point, how many users can a federation hold? Well, there's no way to even know how many users you can have.
Even for the
tools,
validator?
Even for the validator. The validator can have tools to limit how many people they give out access to the federation to. They can also have passwords, which only they know, which users will have to be aware of. So even if they have access to the federation, they won't have the ability to redeem unless they have the latest password, which you can change all the time. But beyond that, if they haven't put in place those different elements, which is a common pattern, they have no way of knowing if they have one user, and they might see 1,000 transactions happening a second, and that could all be coming from one user, or it could be coming from 1,000 users. But those 1,000 users doesn't mean that there's only 1,000 people who are a member of that or in that fairground. There could be 1 million people in the fairground, but only 1,000 of them have transacted at that point in time, at that second. So if you're doing 1,000 transactions a second, over 1,000 seconds, is that from 1 million people over 1,000 seconds? Or is that 1,000 people all transacting once a second? Or is that one person transacting one time a second?
Don't know.
You just don't know. And also that doesn't take into account how many transactions happened before someone went back.
Yeah.
Peer to peer. So someone could have taken that one of those transactions and passed it around to 10 people who never interacted with the mint. And they received it and sold and received and sold, and then the 10th person has now gone back to the mint.
Right.
So you cannot infer anything other than the fact that you know that you have at least one user.
Right.
But you don't know the total number of users you have. So that's the nature. So you don't know how many users you have, and you don't know how much each user has on them.
Right.
So if there is some sort of if there is some sort of flaw in the logic or some sort of exploit that allows you to print more money than should be printed, i.e. someone inflates the supply, and everybody wants to, if they're the choice to be able to print their own money, well, not everybody, but many people would say, you know what, if I have my own personal money printer for the US dollar and it was perfect,
they'll run the machine till it breaks.
Many people will run that. Yeah. But if you cannot know how much people have, and you can't know how many users you have, the way to try and work out that your supply is fixed is to run an audit. Like you say, everybody, roll call, everybody tell me, all of my users, how much balance are you all holding? Add it all up together and make sure the number is under 21 million.
Right.
But that requires me to be able to know how many users I have, be able to count them, and be able for me to verify the number that they tell me that they have. True. So there are mechanisms in the middle. Like, for example, Liquid has this something called confidential transactions, which is a different form of cryptography, but it allows you to see the movement of money, but you can't see how much was moved. So you can say person A sent a certain number of Bitcoin or liquid Bitcoin to person B. And you can know cryptographically that the amount that the person received was equal to the amount that the person sent. You don't know how much it was. It could have been 1 sat or 20 Bitcoin. But you don't know, but you know that the person sent 20 Bitcoin and the person received 20 Bitcoin. So the person sent a certain amount, and the other person, whatever was sent, the other person received the same amount. Yeah. Now, you then know whenever money is, because whenever money is sent from the Bitcoin network to the Liquid network, you know how much was sent on the Bitcoin network because the Bitcoin network is fully public. And so you can infer, even though you can infer that the amount that was sent, that was issued on the Liquid network is equal to the amount that was sent. So you know that no money was created or destroyed going from Bitcoin to Liquid. And then confidential transactions allows you to know, even though I don't know how much was sent internally, I know that it was no money was printed as well. So I still have enough information, but it's still not perfectly private because I now know the number of users I have. I now know who's transacting with whom. I just don't know the amounts. So that's way improvement in privacy, but it's not to the same level as with eCash, where I have no idea how many users I have. I have no idea how much transactions are happening. I don't even see, potentially, I might be only seeing as the mint a tiny fraction of the actual number of transactions happening. I have no way of measuring any metric that provides any information at all, other than the number of mints, number of people who've mint, number of mints that have happened. But I don't even know if that's one person who's minting, doing every mint, or multiple people.
So it's perhaps a fundamental trade-off between auditability and privacy that we're navigating in different ways.
Yeah. And if you want, if your absolute key requirement is to have a fixed supply,
you need auditability.
Then you have to be able to audit that supply.
Of the constellation I think you were describing, Lightning, Fedimint, I don't know if Nostra Bitcoin was the other leg there. Does Liquid fit into this anywhere? Is it actually doing something that those others can't? Is it adding to the complementarity?
I think Liquid is an interesting mixture between Fedimint and Bitcoin. And some of the elements of what happens in Liquid could be in time added to Bitcoin, potentially. For example, the use of confidential transactions. You could improve the level of privacy on Bitcoin by default by implementing confidential transactions in Bitcoin. And so using it in Liquid helps educate and see
the testnet
and test and make use of it today. The downside of that, though, is that because there's always a trade-off, and the downside of confidential transactions is it's newer cryptography. It's been less tested, so there is a risk that assurance that the amount that you receive is the same as the amount the person sent. Even though you cannot see it, you're just trusting the cryptography. There could be some obscure flaw in that logic. And it is possible to use some sort of cryptographic trick to send an amount and receive a greater amount, but the blockchain cannot verify because you're using some sort of cryptographic trick that hasn't yet been discovered, or, as far as we know, and exploit that. And if you do exploit it, then there's no way to know it's been exploited. You could be exploiting it for years. There's always that risk. And it's even greater with all of these zero knowledge proofs. They're even more, that they allow you to do something.
I was going to ask you that. Is what you described on Liquid, is that related to zero knowledge proof?
In a way, yes. It's because you're able to prove something without knowledge of the thing, but you're still able to, without the details of what the amount is, I can prove that the amounts are equal. That's with zero knowledge, I'm able to prove something. And that's a useful thing to be able to prove. But there's always a risk with this, and this is all the rage. And you can go even further. You can prove that you've computed a function without saying what the function is that you've computed. So you can run some sort of complicated smart contract or some program, but without knowing what the program is, you can prove that at extreme, that the program was run correctly. So I can then say, verify that this program is run correctly without knowing what the program is, which has major potential for scaling and all this sort of stuff. But if there's a flaw in that logic, then that could be abused for years and without anyone ever knowing, because they just say the proof says it was run, even if it wasn't run. Or so that's one risk. Another risk is that these transactions tend to be a lot bigger. So to be able to support the same number of transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain as we can do right now, if the average transaction size goes up, you'll have to increase the block size, or you'll have to reduce the number of transactions. So your transaction throughput will go down if you keep the block size the same, or your block size goes up. So the Liquid blockchain is, I believe, 4 times bigger than the Bitcoin blockchain. And increased block size
Less decentralization.
less decentralized. So
Yeah.
there's still a trade-off
trade-offs.
there. So, for example, there's
Huh.
always a trade-off, and these might be slight. You might say, well, modern hardware, it's
Yeah.
fine, but whatever. The takeaway is that you can stick your head in the sand and ignore the fact that there's always trade-offs, or accept that there's trade-offs, and then just have an adult conversation about, are the trade-offs acceptable? But the
Yeah.
discussion of, I just want this because I want this, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I know it just sounds at that point childish if you're just not willing to just, you should start the conversation by recognizing the
Yeah.
reality of physics.
Yeah.
And then, and if we agree with that, then we now look at what are the actual trade-offs. There are sometimes breakthroughs where you do make slight advances where there seem to be very few trade-offs, or the trade-offs are really, really minor.
Right.
But
Was that like with Taproot and things like that?
but even then, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Taproot led to externalities
Yeah.
after
Unforeseen, right?
after several months of analysis, which were unforeseen. So and that's the unknown.
Yes.
So when we say something seems to have no trade-offs, and
You just
people,
haven't
and
seen them
I
yet.
make this mistake all the time. You think, oh, this is the one with zero trade-offs. But the reality is there's always the trade-offs of the unknown trade-off,
Yes.
which is
Right.
there could be things that
Can't see or don't see.
yeah, and if you believe that you're able to analyze every scenario and it's
Then
not
you're
possible to miss,
wrong.
then that's hubris on the highest scale. So you should just accept that. Doesn't mean that we should be in analysis paralysis and do nothing.
Sure.
And we should continue trying to advance, but we should just recognize that is an implicit risk that you're taking for now. What is a $1.2 trillion asset, and is rapidly on the way to being worth significantly more than that.
Yeah. So there's always a cost, or to say it in a monetary way, right?
Yeah, just deciding. There's always a cost to pay.
Yeah.
It's just deciding which costs you want to pay
towards
and you can do that knowingly or unknowingly.
Yes. And if you think there's not a cost to pay, that is the height of hubris, or you're at least dispensing with the unknown unknowns, which means I always like to refer to this as totalizing knowledge, or the belief in totalizing knowledge, which is a totalitarian mentality. Milton in Paradise Lost wrote that evil is the force that believes its knowledge is complete. It was like when people think they have it all figured out, that tends to be when we do the most horrible things.
Yeah. And I've made that mistake, and reality is I'm going to continue to make that mistake, because no matter how much you think that you have kicked the habit, it's a very, very powerful habit. But conversations like this remind you that we are humans, we are fallible. One of our superpowers, though, is community. And that allows us to specialize and to lean on each other to help compensate. It cannot fully compensate, but to a great extent, some of the limitations of any individual.
Yeah, the blind spots of the individual can be seen by others, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why we need team, and we need division of labor,
family. We need community. And for me personally, that's something that I've been thinking a lot about more. But and it started off when I started thinking a lot about what Fedimint is, and it seems like they are disconnected. But as you say, Fedimint is this incredible eCash protocol and so on, but it has this apparent weakness. It requires trust, and the eCash protocol, invented in 1983, had this this trade-off, and every eCash protocol that exists. And today you have Fedimint, but there's also another called Cashew that are popular in the Bitcoin ecosystem, have this trade-off. But what was interesting about Fedimint when I heard about it from Eric was how he dealt with that trade-off, and he tried to reduce it to the extent possible. And what he did is he took the concept of a federation, which is something that Liquid uses as well. So instead of having one kiosk run by one person, you have the kiosk is effectively run by a group of people. And each of those people receive the same transaction, the same note to be minted. And they individually stamp it effectively with their, I'm simplifying, but they stamp it with their own unique key. And then you receive back this sort of combined envelope, which has been signed by, let's say there's 7 guardians, 7 different guardians, 7 different kiosk operators. And they will sign that in a way where, as long as the majority of them are honest, then you know that you will be able to receive your Bitcoin back if you wanted to redeem. So if one of them became a road actor and decided, I don't want to give you back your Bitcoin, they cannot prevent the others from returning your Bitcoin. If a second one were to do that, they still won't be able to prevent. So that is a significant enhancement over the original protocol from 1983, because that required you to trust one person for the entire community. Now you're trusting a quorum of people. And so then the second point is the realization that...
Well, sorry, just with that point, you can then get into some more of the social game theory design about who those people are and segregating them geographically and things like that, right?
Exactly. It gives you a number of benefits. One is you have a system that potentially can be a lot more reliable. So if one of those guardians and their machine that's running the Fedimint software is down, the system can continue to operate because it doesn't need all of them to be online at any one time to be able to continue to work. Whereas if you only had one person that was the mint and they closed shop, you have to wait for them to come back from lunch before you can redeem your capital. So that gives you higher uptime, i.e. higher reliability. In fact, there was an issue with recently with a federation where one of the guardians was down actually for 4 or 5 days. But and it was communicated that this federation is not currently running with all the guardians running, and that was important to communicate to the users. But actually, the federation continued to run and operate because of the fact that it was federated. Now, if it was one guardian only, as per the original design, and they were down for 3 or 4 days, then everybody would have to have waited for that person to come back from this extended time, or at lunch, to come back before they would be able to transact with the Lightning Network or transact on chain, and i.e. receive back their original Bitcoin. And also they would have to wait for, if they wanted to swap out to avoid double spend, to swap out Bitcoin, one eCash they received with new eCash, so that the double spend risk is gone. They would have had to wait for that. So they would have had to have this period where their eCash they couldn't really transact without risk of being double spent for a long period of time, and they wouldn't be able internally to the community. And at the same time, they wouldn't be able to withdraw. But because it was federated, that didn't happen. It also, if one person became a bad actor for some reason, and then you would be able to have some sort of resistance against bad actors. It's not the same as Bitcoin. It's way more decentralized, but it's way, way better. But it does give you this sort of, it starts to make you think, okay, and this is when I heard this idea originally. I was thinking, okay, but who are the best people to choose from as guardians? And what are the best contexts to run a federation, this eCash system? And that's when it occurred to me, after hearing this idea from Eric for Fedimint, that this was back in 2021. After hearing this idea, I realized that the best scenario is for trusted communities. And trusted communities could choose, and they have the ability to already choose and identify people within that community that they trust.
Like elders, village elders, things
we
like
do
that.
this all the time.
Yeah.
This is the superpower of humans and humankind is the ability to form society, complex society, and specialize and use trust as a technology. Community is a technology. And it's because of community that we've been able to, put a man on the moon and build the most complex device that's ever existed on the planet, which is the microchip and everything in between. And so that is a technology. It's a powerful technology that's led to civilization. Why not use that as a mechanism to solve the problem of identifying people who are more trustworthy than others? We can augment that with things like webs of trust, which is where Nostr comes in and so on. But again, trust is a powerful tool when used correctly. I also think trust doesn't scale, which is a feature, not a bug. It works at Dunbar's number or lower. But it's when you try the problem is when you try to scale it to 1 billion users and a few people to trust the resources of 1 billion users.
We can't even, that's why Dunbar's number exists, right? We have a cognitive threshold of 150 people that we can know on a first name basis or facially recognize, maybe facially recognize more, I guess, but trust, as you said, about 150. And so you're describing a situation where the protocol layer meets the social layer, right? The community being the social layer and the Fedimint protocol being more the protocol layer. But these two things, again, complement one another in a very interesting way, especially when you move from one validator to a decentralized group of validators. Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom and understanding of Bitcoin and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. It's a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids can learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent-vetted, and only released when it's parent-approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan-funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen over 40 million times and was tweeted about by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now. And if you like what you see, you can use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off a subscription to the Angel Studios app and watch all of the episodes. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. And remember to use code BREEDLOVE for 10% off. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Before starting the What is Money show, I spent most of my career as a CFO, overseeing internal technology implementations and business acquisitions. Over the next 10 years, it is projected that over 12 million businesses in the US will be sold. If you are an operator running a business generating between $5 and $200 million of revenue, and you're considering selling your business within the next decade, then there is a significant opportunity for you to deploy technology to streamline business processes, reduce operating costs, and enhance the multiple your business ultimately sells for. To this end, I am partnering with the team at Emerge Dynamics, a firm with decades of experience in maximizing the value of privately held small and middle market businesses. Go to emergedynamics.com/breedlove to learn how you can build an attractive, high multiple company that maximizes your return when you fully exit. Again, that's emergedynamics.com/breedlove. I don't know if you listen to John Vervaeke much, but he's often going into etymology, and one that he did for community, which I think you'll appreciate, is that he breaks it down into common unity.
Okay.
So a community is a group of people arranged under a point of common unity, right? This could be your national identity. This could be a cultural value. This could be a monetary system, right? And so that is, I think, a very interesting point to take a group of people that are ideally already in community, right? They're already gathered under a point of common unity. And then you just give them the Fedimint protocol as a tool to enhance their transaction throughput and privacy, and then plug into the larger Bitcoin network or Lightning network for transactions outside of that scope.
You've 100% hit the nail on the head. This was the light bulb moment for me, because I was looking for a way of getting people to be able to access and hold Bitcoin, but that could practically be used by communities or people within communities who were not necessarily as technically capable or financially capable as needed to be able to fully self-custody, even though that's the best if you can do it. And Fedimint came along, and I realized that it's an incredible technology, but it's the missing piece to make it fully work is community. That's the final piece that makes Fedimint work. And so the community not only is the recipient of this technology, this freedom technology, and Bitcoin and Lightning is integrated in, but also it's also the piece that makes it work. Yeah. And it was high on this idea. I went to the first Africa Bitcoin conference, and I did a talk, Africa X Bitcoin wins. And what I was saying was that Africa wins with, I'll say the first 30 seconds of it. And I said, Africa wins with Bitcoin's help, and Bitcoin wins with Africa's help. Africa wins with Bitcoin's help, and Bitcoin wins with Africa's help. I'll say that one more time. Africa only wins with Bitcoin's help, and Bitcoin only wins with Africa's help. And I went on to explain why, because, and it's not just Africa, it's like, but around the world, but especially in the global south, people have innovated in the pursuit of community custody, of value, because they are either unbanked or underbanked or debanked. But banking, being able to custody and hold and share and transact is useful and a valuable service. But because they're just commercially not viable, or the services they receive are just incredibly expensive and low value, often. Obviously, if you're middle class and upper class in these countries, you have great services. But there's a vast class of people who have no banking or underbanked, or if they're living under the yoke of authoritarian regimes, they may have great banking, they just can't use it because it will put them at risk to use it, so they're debanked. And so what they have to do is they have to innovate and come up with their own solutions. And the solution is, well, community banking. And so there are a plethora of different innovative solutions for communities to save together, to custody together, to build wealth together.
Mhm.
And they go under a multitude of names. They're prevalent in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and they're incredibly prevalent in Africa.
Mhm.
And so they've already A/B tested and
Mhm.
perfected or worked on the state of the art of community custody and finding mechanisms to be able to find trusted counterparties or guardians
Mhm.
within these communities. There's a movie coming out soon. I think it's just released called Unbankable, which goes and it gives. It's a really interesting context because there's a guy who's from the West, but his family's spent a lot of time in Africa, and he was his concept for the movie I think was quite interesting, where he's saying, what can the West learn from the global South, especially Africa, in terms of banking?
Mhm.
Which is normally you're saying, what can the global South learn from the West? But this is actually the other way around. And one of the excerpts was from this. My friend Eric, who's from Gridless, it's Bitcoin mining in Kenya and East Africa, sent me this and showing this scene where this community saves as a community, and then they hold the money, in physical money, in this box. And they come into the room with this box, and this box has 3 locks on it, but it's arranged in such a way that 3 different elders from the village have one of the keys. As long as, and it's just really clever the way these have been arranged, you only need to unlock 2 of these keys to be able to open the box. Any 2.
It's an analog multi-sig setup.
It's an analog multi-sig solution. Yeah, it's an analog multi-sig. And
Cool.
and so they've come to, so, and this is because also what happens if someone, because they have to keep that key secret, and then the key is held by a different person. I mean, the box is held by a different person, and they only hold the box, but they have none of the keys. And the 3 elders have the 3 keys. So it's effectively it's effectively 2 out of 3 multi-sig with custody held by another party.
That's so cool.
And it's holding value on behalf of the community. And there are many other ideas around how people save and so on, and they go by multiple different names. There's Stockvals, there's Chamas, there's Kui, there's all these different systems, and they all have multiple different variations. But what it shows is there's a ton of innovation happening there. Now in the West, we have almost none of that innovation. Why? Because we don't need it. Because, we may need it, but in the minds of most people, we don't need it because our banking works. So then there's no incentive to innovation. Necessity is the mother of innovation.
Yeah.
There is no necessity, no innovation.
Yeah.
Where there is necessity, there's a ton of innovation. So we see this protocol called eCash, which is an incredible protocol with these incredible privacy properties, scaling. It works beautifully with Lightning to act as this way of sending value from one federation to another at low cost and high speed. Maybe Lightning doesn't scale, at least at this point in time, to every person on the planet, but it will definitely scale to every federation on the planet. And also the people who have the skills to be able to run their own Lightning node, great. Then it starts to make sense to scale, and it's all underpinned by Bitcoin. But Fedimint needs innovation around trusted custody, and you have these continents in the global South that are actually, for once, the leaders in community custody paradigms and protocols. So, do we want to come in and say this is how you should do community custody? Or do we say, well, you are doing it already. You've been doing it for decades, centuries. Why don't we just give you these technologies and you implement the protocols that you already have?
Right.
But we act like we just level you up. So we summarize this as, and you just said it really eloquently before, but we said Fedi, this is what we do as a company, is combining this technology plus Bitcoin and Lightning with communities. And so Fedi combines the most fundamental human technology of community with freedom technologies like Bitcoin, like Lightning, like eCash, like Nostr, and more to level up humanity. And that's the realization that using this technology, the human technology combined with the digital technology of freedom technologies, that's what leads to something magical happening. And that was the realization. But you made the same one.
That is so freaking cool. I mean, yeah, because you're not even then selling them anything in a way. You're just saying like, look, you're already doing it. However, there just happens to be better money, better tools to do what you're already doing with.
Yeah.
And so it's not a push, I guess, almost like they would just be more likely to embrace it given that they're already doing these things. That's it's like a match made in heaven, I guess.
So we have Fedimint, and you asked the difference between Fedi and Fedimint.
Yeah.
Fedimint is this, and it's because now it comes.
You said.
So Fedimint is this incredible protocol, and Lightning is this again freedom technology.
Can I say one other thing about because it just clicked with me earlier as you were saying it that it's not only that. I originally thought it's like, okay, Fedimint, the protocol, and Lightning are sort of two different options for people to transact custody off chain.
Yeah, but Lightning is anybody to anyone and less trust. Yeah,
very complementary, you're saying, because the Lightning is wiring together these different federations, essentially. So Fedimint makes Lightning more usable, Lightning makes Fedimint more usable, something like that.
Think about it as
and both of them
motorways
make Bitcoin more usable.
and flight paths and shipping lanes.
Yeah.
Versus cities and towns.
Okay.
And within the city and the town, you have streets and lanes and boulevards and so on.
Yeah.
Which and you think within the city, there's a ton of transfer of humans, let's say, and goods and services going around, and they're going around these roads and lanes and streets, but for the high volume, high capacity transfer between one city and other, you're not going to have a lane. You're going to have a motorway, or you're going to for further. And then if it's like really far distance, you're going to go and use shipping planes and shipping lanes and so on.
Yeah.
So the Lightning Network is this, as the name suggests, it's the network. It's the thing that connects the cities together. Now, if you are a wealthy individual and you're wealthy enough and you have the resources, you can have your own house that's not in a city with your own road, private road leading up to it that you maintain yourself and so on. You can do that, and that's the equivalent of someone having their own Lightning network node running, or you can have people can set up a Lightning node themselves, and if they're doing a couple of transactions a day and they don't mind having low uptime and it works, 99 times out of 100, it's relatively easy. But if you want it to work, 9,999 times out of 1,000 for almost any amount, that's a lot more complex to do. And it's the same. If I create my own sort of dirt road and it's just used by me and myself now and again, and I don't mind that there's, sometimes there's a rain and there's an issue and I have to sort of dig the car out of the ditch now and again, and I'm okay with that, that's fine. But if I want to use it, if I want it to operate like the interstate highway, then you need to put in way more resources to be able to handle that traffic. Again, this is sort of obvious when you're dealing with physical roads. When you're dealing with the digital roads of the Lightning Network, people assume that setting up their Lightning node for themselves will be similar to the experience that a company like Wallet of Satoshi or Strike or Cash has when they're sending Lightning transactions. But they'll have a whole team focused on supporting that because the amount of transaction volume going over that part of the Lightning Network is a lot higher. Therefore, the maintenance and support costs are a lot higher.
Yeah.
But if it's you and it's just one pickup truck goes, and again, if you're going in, day out, you won't be able to use a dirt road. You still have to tarmac it at the very least.
Yeah.
But if you're going, you use it in the holidays and you drive once every year and you arrive, and even while you're there, you don't use a truck. You just go fishing, and you're just walking around. So you don't need to. Again, you don't need to use the Lightning Network often. It's okay.
Yeah.
To run your own node. But most people will live in cities because the economic density is going to be higher, and the vast majority of transactions that you're going to have for food, accommodation, entertainment are going to be local.
Yeah.
You might buy something online or watch something on Netflix or so on, and that's an international transaction. But most transactions will be local for food, accommodation, for healthcare, etc. And so in that context, the same thing happens with the internet. You think about it. If I send a message to you, say using Signal, and I'm in Lisbon and you're in Miami, for example, and I send you that message, we will feel like it's going over the internet, but it's not actually going over the internet. It's going, my phone and your phone is not connected to the internet. My phone is connected to my telecom or internet providers intranet. Yeah. Their own internet for their own internal customers based. So let's say a popular telecoms company in Portugal is NOS, NOS. So if I'm talking to someone else who's using NOS as their internet connection in Portugal, then we're not going to touch the internet. I'm going to be sending a transaction, sending that message from myself to them, and we're going to stay within NOS's personal internet, or what's known as an intranet. Intranet, yeah. And if you're using, I don't know what you're using, but say there's Verizon, I think is. Verizon. Yeah. So if you're talking to someone on Verizon, you don't touch the internet. Right. It's their local community of Verizon users. Yeah. Why would they incur the costs of routing it over the internet when they don't have to? They're just routed internally. Yeah. However, when I'm sending a message to you using the Signal app still, for example, or WhatsApp or whatever, it will go from the NOS intranet to the actual internet over the internet, and then go into the Verizon intranet to your phone. However, the protocol that we use for sending, the things that we send around are data packets, IP, internet packets. They're just packets of information. Even if I'm sending it within the intranet, I'm still sending the same data around in terms of the type of data. It's standardized. It's standardized information going around, whether it's going over the internet or within the intranet. Yeah. So how does this relate to Bitcoin, Lightning, and Fedimint? Well, the actual unit that we're sending around is Bitcoin. That is the unit. It's still Bitcoin is the unit of value in this case, as opposed to the unit of information, which is the packet, the byte of information. It's now
data packet. It's a value packet.
It's a value packet, but it's still Bitcoin. If I'm sending it, it could be eCash Bitcoin, it could be Lightning Bitcoin, it could be main chain Bitcoin, but it's still Bitcoin. And so when I'm sending eCash from one person to another, the lingua franca for value is still Bitcoin. Within this intranet of my federation, say my family federation in Lisbon. Or I want to send value to you or someone in your family federation, you or your wife, and I can send that value, but then it would go over to the Mint, which is like the interface, the gateway between, we call it the gateway, between eCash and the Lightning Network. And I will have my eCash Bitcoin swapped for Lightning Bitcoin, and it goes over the Lightning Network which is the highway or the flight path in this case. That will then go over the Lightning Network, which is global and requires significantly less trust. It's basically almost as trustless, not quite, but almost as trustless as main chain. And you would receive it a few seconds later at the gateway between which is like the entrance into the fair, into your town or whatever.
Federation town,
your federation. and it gets converted to Lightning Bitcoin back into eCash Bitcoin. But this is Breedlove eCash Bitcoin versus Nwosu eCash Bitcoin, and then you or your wife receives that eCash in their federation. But all the way along, it's Bitcoin throughout the system. So Bitcoin is the unit of account, and it's the base value packet. Lightning is the mechanism to send value from one federation to another, and Fedimint is the mechanism to store and send value privately within a given federation. From a user's point of view, if they're sending money to someone next door, someone over the Lightning network, or even someone over the Bitcoin network, if it's a larger amount that you just want to send, you think Lightning is not going to be able to, the right one to use because it's larger. Either way, it's the experience will feel the same no matter what. And that's exactly the same way things happen with when you're sending data packets around, or when you're sending human packets around in the real world. Where, if I'm just walking down the street or going shopping, I would just use a car and use roads. But if I'm traveling from Lisbon to Miami, then I use a road to get to the gateway, which is the airport, which is the gateway between one country and another. Then I go in a plane through the air. So this mass transport mechanism, and I land in Miami, and then there's a gateway between that to the normal road system, and then I'm using an Uber or a car to pick me up or whatever it is to tend to transfer around. And by that mechanism, we can scale to billions of people or billions of documents being sent around. And logically, this is how we've scaled everything. We should scale value in the same way. It intuitively fits into that proven paradigm. Now, there may be other paradigms, but we know this works already.
That's fantastic. Well, brilliantly illustrated. And I think the other thing that occurred to me there was, those intranets, as you called them, they conform their standards to the internet, right?
Yes.
Just like these intranets you're describing, eCash, Lightning Network, they're conforming their standardization to Bitcoin, which is basically the internet of...
The lingua franca,
The lingua franca, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I guess you need something else instead of lingua. Yeah, but the language of money, but the lingua value, I don't know.
Yeah, because lingua franca means common tongue, or standard.
So I don't know
language,
what common money.
I don't know
anyway,
either, but
lingua dinero.
The common language of economic numeracy, basically, right? That's what money is, but Bitcoin is serving that purpose on the internet. So we were talking about, obviously we talked about the Fedimint protocol, and we're talking about what Fedi is and does, and then you decompose Fedi into Fedi the company and Fedi the app. Maybe you just pick back up on that thread and tell us about Fedi.
So we spent a lot talking about Fedimint, and that's the power behind, one of the powers behind Fedi, the company. But once we realized the potential for this, initially I thought, okay, this is a great technology, Fedimint, and it works beautifully in a complementary fashion with Lightning and Bitcoin. But it needs, and also because Eric's such a humble guy, it needs a cheerleader. So I became, I like to think I became, at that time at least, and there's many other cheerleaders who've taken on the mantle, but I became Fedimint's biggest cheerleader. And I'd sold my company, my previous company, The Exchange. I had time on my hands. So to anyone and everyone that would be interested, I told them this is incredible protocol, Fedimint, Chairman eCash, but federated, this step change over this 40-year technology. That led to a point when it was actually Matt Odell, who was a big fan of Eric, and we know each other as well, and from my days from being CEO of Coinfloor. And when he heard that we were both, one was working on Fedimint and the creator of it, and the other one was the sort of advocate for it, he asked us both to speak at It was Bitcoin Miami, in fact, 2 years back, not last year's, but the year before. And I'd still, sold my exchange, and I thought this was a great technology, but I wanted to take some time to rest after running a company for nearly a decade. But I promised, you know what? I will do this. I'll go and do this talk at Bitcoin Miami. It was on the open source stage, I believe. And we were one of the last talks of the day because he wanted to round it off. It would be the event to round off the round of the talk. And so I came on and I did this talk about Fedimint and its potential to bring Bitcoin to billions. And once you realize that you have Fedimint as the cities effectively, and Lightning connecting this together, all running on top of Bitcoin, it's clear that this could scale. Now we finally had the solution to scale to billions of users with incredible privacy and ease of use. And it can also be it's scalable. You can add functionality on top of it to support anything that you may need. So that was a talk. And afterwards, Eric did a talk with Casey Rodemore, the inventor of inscriptions, funny enough. Because Casey Rodemore was an early fan of Fedimint as well. And they did a talk which was more technical depth. So mine sort of set the scene and they went into more technical depth about this. But just after my talk, a number of things happened which changed the trajectory of Fedimint and myself, because I was about to disappear in the sunset for a bit of time, for some well-earned rest. One of the key ones was that we had Alex Gladstein come up to me, and he'd heard the talk. I'd mentioned that I was going to talk about it. He went to listen, and he was like, "Okay, this is incredible technology. You have to come to the Oslo Freedom Forum to talk to some of the activists and human rights defenders and NGOs about this technology." And I sort of thought about it. He a little bit of convincing, because it was in Norway, in Oslo. It was going to be cold. I'm not a big fan of cold weather, but he introduced me to some of the activists there. It was the first time I met Farida Naborema, for example, who later that year created and put on the first Africa Bitcoin conference, the biggest Bitcoin conference in Africa. But she was at the Bitcoin Miami, just again hearing more about the Bitcoin community, and at that time, and I was introduced to her, and after that I agreed to go, and so I went there, and I was blown away by and shocked by the stories, but also inspired. Bravery, incredible speakers, incredible stories. I obviously aware of the challenges happening around the world, but for hundreds of millions of people, but this just really shone a light on it for me. And so I realized that I'm going to commit myself to supporting these people. I have the resources, I have the skills, and I now have the passion to do it, so I will. But that was a separate thing. But then on the way back from a side event that was happening after Oslo, a few of us were on this plane flying back, a conversation struck up, and the conversation was with some of the activists. It was Farida, also Ludmila Kozlowska. It was Roya Mahbub, and myself, and also Jeff Booth, and of course Leopoldo Lopez. Sorry, and these are all very prolific, incredible activists and human rights defenders, and they were talking about how these NGOs could use Bitcoin to roll out at scale, and not to 10,000 people, but to 100,000, 1 million people. And I was listening to this, and I realized that Fedimint was the absolute perfect solution for this. And I also realized that Fedimint's power comes from community, and these activists and human rights defenders were the ultimate community leaders. They're the ultimate guardians. I mean, they devoted their life towards supporting and funding these communities, and they raise money in the West and deliver billions of dollars of aid to the global South. And obviously, they're trusted by their community members. And so we could take their existing power of community and leverage Fedimint for it. And so when I saw that, then I realized that we had an opportunity here. This is not just a great theoretical technology, but as also we now had a market that could utilize it, that valued all of the features, simplicity, low cost, but they also valued privacy because of what they were doing. It was a perfect match. So I went back, talked to Eric and Justin, who was the third co-founder, with this sort of fever in my eyes, and we realized that to help these, it cannot just be an open source project. You needed capital that can only come about from a commercially viable business venture, and you needed it to be VC funded to make sure that it had the capital to grow to the levels where we could deliver on the mission of bringing Bitcoin to billions. Now, this Fedimint can be used by everybody everywhere, but you always want to find your first community that can help, that has one of the most extreme use cases so that you can get that strong product market fit. You can battle test the software and you can use by everybody. It's a bit like...
they had the most pain, basically, right?
They had the most pain and they had the most extreme circumstances. But the end result was that this is going to lead to a product, or it leads to a product which is actually beneficial to everybody. It's a bit like a Land Rover or a Jeep Wrangler or a Swiss Army knife. All three are these multi-purpose tools that were designed to support people in incredibly extreme environments, in the theater of war, or aid, or very extreme environments. They've been battle tested, but because they've been battle tested, so in such extreme environments, we can be confident to use it to open cans of bottles of beer or to take Johnny on the school run, because if it works for ferrying wounded in war, it's going to work for protecting my kid. And so, even though the vast majority of uses is going to be more mundane use cases, it's being tested in the most extreme circumstances.
Battle hardened
is what gives you the confidence. And also, the core first customer as well is a customer that we all cared a lot about, and we had a way to help them today. While others are trying to figure out why they need Bitcoin, and everybody will come to that realization, these people just needed a solution to a problem, and they realized this. They were coming to realize that this was a thing to help solve their problem, where they're being in this case debanked in many cases, or unbanked, but often debanked. They have great banking, but they just cannot use it because it puts them at physical risk using that banking. So that's what led to the formation of Fedi. I wanted to make sure that everybody was values aligned, not just in the core team, but also in our investors, because I've had experience in the past of non-core values aligned investors, and it can act like shackles on your ability to grow. But values aligned investors are the opposite. They act like lighter fuel or rocket fuel, and they push you forward. And so the way to find values aligned investors were people with low time preference, people who think differently, people who are people who value social capital as much as they value financial capital. And that, for me, very easily, it was clear that it was Bitcoin focused VCs. So we insisted that we only raised, at least for the first couple of rounds, from Bitcoin-only VCs. And we did that over a period of the next less than a year. In the first week, we raised 4.2 million and seed. And then less than a year later, we raised another 17 million or so to take us to 21.21 million. I like 21s.
Yeah.
All from Bitcoin-focused investors, and they've all been incredible. We've put together an incredible team, and that's Fedi the company. Its mission is to, as we say, provide services and support for communities around the world, wherever they are in the world, but starting with the most disempowered to build this incredible solution. Now, what is that solution? To begin with, that was the remit. And we knew that solution was going to contain freedom technologies like Fedimint, like Lightning, like Bitcoin. But what we quickly realized is you need some sort of app or software which acts like this super app combining all these things into one app. So the Fedi app is this community super app. It's an app run by communities, for communities, for the benefit of communities. But it internally has a Bitcoin wallet inside, a Lightning wallet, a Fedimint wallet. It supports Nostr. It supports all these protocols in one place, so the user doesn't have to deal with the complexities. And that's the hard thing that we've been building for the last 2 years, and we just launched 2 years later. Initially, I was very optimistic. I said, it will take 6 months, but it's actually complex to take all these things together. And that's just version 1, just like the iPhone 1. We're constantly now taking feedback and improving further. That's one part, it's the Fedi app. The other thing that's really important about Fedi is the human part. So what we realize is when you're dealing with the majority of people, you cannot just say, here, DIY, do it yourself. Some can do that, and the initial communities are run by people who are more, often run by people who are more technically able to do it themselves. Just like the people who run Bitcoin nodes themselves, or Bitcoin Mind, or run Lightning nodes tend to be more technical. But most people will always be comfortable with people helping with the setup, or if they've got an issue, helping resolve, even though it's theirs and they have, and it's their communities. Just like you have your house, it's your house, but most people will still hire a plumber or an electrician, or a, interior designer under their control, under their direction. Yeah. Some will go off and learn all of these skills themselves. And so this is another big part of what we do. We have this thing we call the Fedi Order. And these are people in each country, we call them Fedi Knights, who act like a decentralized genius bar. And I think that's a part of the magic of the iPhone, is not just the iPhone, but it's the Apple stores and the Genius Bar. That's part of the product. For sure. So if you have a problem, wherever you are in the world, you can go into an Apple store and you can know you can get a consistent quality of service. Again, wherever you are in the world, in the global south, where we're focused right now, you will find a local Fedi Knight who can locate communities, educate them, and support them in whatever they need to make sure they get the best use of the Fedi app and also all the freedom technologies. So if they have challenges with Bitcoin, with Lightning, with Fedimint, acquiring Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin, or what to do with it, and so on, all of that sort of stuff, the local Fedi Knights will be able to support them.
And are they on the team explicitly, or are these?
No, they're on the team explicitly. They're salaried employees. Okay. So the idea would be, and we think this is going to be a massive differentiator from us, from most other technology companies, which are or even Bitcoin companies, where they're going to be, majority of people are just on the technology side. Yeah. With us, in the fullness of time, the vast majority of our employees will be on the community side. Yeah. We're hoping to be in the coming years approaching 400 to 500 employees the vast majority of those people will be these local knights in each region on a salary, not commission-based. And the reason why is because their incentive is almost net promoter score, i.e. How
Quality
satisfied
of
the quality of service is what's not the revenue we make. Because we think on the use side, on the revenue side, we are, I thought it would take a while to determine market product fit, but we're already very confident that there's huge demand for this because, it's clear people want to be able to have a way to buy in these communities that we deal with, to buy, hold, transact, and sell Bitcoin in a simple way at low cost and with privacy when especially where the privacy puts you at risk. That's something that's clear is a demand. The issue is it just has to work really well, and that's why we have to put a lot of effort on the engineering side, and also they can be supported. Once you have those two, then the usage comes.
So before we hit record, you and I were talking about human dynamics, relationships, and I'm curious now that we're talking about the Fedi team. What has it been like for you building a startup in the Bitcoin space and scaling it to hire? I don't know how many people you are now, but you've had to hire.
I don't know. I think mid-30s, maybe. We're approaching 40. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess what has it been like building a startup in the Bitcoin space and then going through the hiring? How do you think about the human dynamics, given that you are such a community-focused company rather than just a technology-focused company?
Yeah, and so that's key for us. I think that I have a number of maxims that I say when I talk to the team, and we can go into that more. Just generally, my philosophy around startups, but one of them is the 4 Ps, and I believe it's philosophy, people, process, product in that priority. So philosophy is, what do you believe? Why are you doing what you're doing? What's your strategy? All of that sort of stuff about you're just thinking your thoughts about this. And I spend a lot of time on that, and the team spends a lot of time thinking about this, because you can save a lot of actual physical time building stuff and working on stuff by thinking about your philosophy and knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
And even though you feel the desire to rush in, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. It's important just to think, why are you doing what you're doing, and not to try to be pushed at the pace of others, not to become, I do worry, I do worry about a trend for us to forget the low time preference, which is the superpower of the Bitcoin community compared to other communities. So
what was the second half of that? Fools rush in, and
where angels fear to tread.
Where angels fear to tread.
Yeah, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So the first thing is philosophy, and in our case, our philosophy has we as a team have come up with a number of things, and we review them every 3 months just to make sure they haven't changed. These are things that we believe, and it's another acronym. In this case, it's my legal counsel came up with this acronym. It's by coincidence, but it's FI teach, F-I teach, or actually freedom I teach, because the first F is freedom. So for us, the beliefs that we have as an organization are freedom. We believe in freedom, and we clarify what we mean by freedom, but I won't go into that now.
No, I would actually, if you don't mind.
It's basically that we believe that everybody, we believe that we want to see freedom in the world, and we believe that people should be free to do what they want to do, as long as it doesn't impinge upon the freedoms of others.
Yeah.
That's our view. We have integrity as well. And integrity is not just acting with integrity, but including being able to say the things from a position of love to others that are difficult to say. Trust as well. It's important to trust each other. Then E is empathy. It's important to try and understand not just the clients, other users, other members of the team. A is anti-fragility, and that's the property of the opposite of fragility, which is, again, people consider the opposite of fragility sturdiness. But fragility is when you're attacked or damaged, you get weaker. Yeah. Sturdiness is not the opposite of fragility. That's when you're attacked or damaged, you stay the same. Yeah. You don't get worse, but you don't get better. Right. Anti-fragility is the incredible property of Bitcoin and certain people of if you're attacked or damaged, you dust yourself up, you learn and you get better, you get stronger, you get faster. And we try to maintain that as a culture within the organization. And I like that about the Fedimint protocol and the people who are working on that. And Fedi likes to have that. Then C is community. You think about it's family and community, and it's community. Obviously, we're a company that's a community super app, but it's also community within the company. And then finally is humility, and exemplified by many members of my team, not least of which is my co-founder Eric. And I try as much as possible to ape him in that regard. It's exceptional, and I think that allows you to be empathetic and so on, and they all work to reinforce each other. But if we drill into the community, this is where it comes on to people. If you have a very strong philosophy and you can articulate it, then it acts like a magnet for people who share those philosophies, but it also acts as the opposite effect. There's this repellent for anybody who doesn't, which is good because it simplifies things for them and for you. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that a different set of philosophies are wrong. Right. It's just that they're different, and you're just clarifying. Yeah. So you save time because there might be people who have different set of priorities, and this is not the right organization for them. And they should, and the quicker they find out, the better they'll find an organization that makes sense for them, and vice versa. And so you'll attract the right people because they will be attracted to this philosophy. But a key part of that is community, and we have to try and we worked to live that. So we're very family friendly. I'm happy to have these our video calls, and sometimes it's interrupted where someone's kid comes on and gives a person a hug. That's fine. It's completely fine. We had and I don't know how much as we scale this can be repeated, but I'll try to do as much as possible. But we had our first team event where people came together this year in Prague, but we're about family, so why should it just be the members of the team? So all the people's immediate partners and children could be invited as well. So we ended up having way more people. I think 50, 60 people came at that time, and it was great because you had people you had a baby, one baby who's like with a little Fedi embroidered, they made a Fedi embroidered t-shirt for him by his mother, all the way through to teenagers and also husbands and wives of the team members, and that really changed the dynamic of our team get together, because it was much more about family, but that's our value. So, and I think again, that attracts and makes people more passionate about what we're doing, because we're not just community outside, but it's community inside. That's awesome. So, and then my view, finally, to round it off is, if you've got the right philosophy, you'll attract the right people. And with the right people, they will put in the right processes that lead to the right product. And so most people focus way too much in on the product. And I love product and product management. But my belief is the more time I spend on philosophy and people, the less time I need to spend on process and product, because they will
Takes
put in
care
the
of
process and
themselves.
product,
Yeah.
and any of the questions or the inconsistency they have will be answered by just going back to the philosophy.
Right.
The philosophy and the core values will answer the questions for you.
So it's a downstream thing, right? The philosophy, then the people, then the process, and the product. And the more you get it right upstream, the better it is. The easier it is to get it right downstream, I guess.
And in our case, community is a big aspect of that.
Yeah.
And empathy is key. We focus on things like human-centered design, which requires a lot of empathy, and just being willing to learn every day.
That is so freaking cool. What you mentioned Zoom calls, so I assume people are all over the world. Like, how's your team?
That's one of the challenges, but the opportunities. We have very diverse set of employees. We have people in every continent, I think, pretty much every continent.
Mm-hmm.
We have people on the ground, but also not just on the ground. We have engineers in 4 continents, maybe 5. I don't know. We're changing all the time. So the team is dispersed. Yeah. That makes management more difficult. But again, because we have high empathy, we have high trust. If you don't have a high empathy, high trust environment, it doesn't work to have that. And also, this is all really important. But if you don't have high competence, it still doesn't work. So that comes from integrity.
Yeah.
And so we have an incredibly strong team, and it's only getting stronger with every hire. That's one of my big pushes now. We've got a number of key hires that we've been making over the coming months, and we just want to get the best, absolute best people, because we can only, a startup is either accelerating its growth or dying. There's no steady state for a VC-backed startup.
Right.
That is, and we don't want to go that way. So that means you have to constantly just becoming more and more ambitious with what you want to do. And we think the sky's the limit for this, and the importance of having a system or service which is as easy to use as other super apps out there, like a WeChat, but is fully decentralized and fully private. It's too important to get it wrong. So we just have to go for the best. We have to be able to do something that can viably replace all these other alternatives, the ideas of the Telegrams or the X.coms, but instead of being run by some random dude in Silicon Valley, it needs to be something that's not run by any one organization, fully decentralized, eventually fully open source, where the power is put into the hands of communities around the world. We must succeed. So we're going to just get more and more ambitious in what we're trying to achieve over the coming years.
That's fantastic, man. It's so good. The starting with the philosophy, and there's a direct tie, I think, to the earlier quote where you said fools rush in where angels dare not tread, because one of the philosophy, Philia Sophia, the love of wisdom, one of the easy definitions of wisdom is don't be foolish, basically. So starting with really thinking about who you are and where you're going such that you don't do foolish things sets the tone for the people, the process, the product to go the right direction. And so that seems very logical to just start.
Well, I think
with the philosophy, but not many companies do that. I mean, they put the mission statement on the wall or whatever it may be. But
it's hard because, and this is where everything acts like a check and balance. Our investors help us. And the prevalence of low time preference is not common in all investors, but it's out there. But some don't have that mindset. It's much more common in the Bitcoin communities, which that helped us a ton.
Sure.
And also the team acts as a check and balance for each other.
Yeah.
Because we attract people with a similar philosophy. So when someone maybe including myself, might be
Yeah.
rushing someone and goes, look, Obi, do you
Call
think
you
we
on.
not?
Yeah.
Because there's rarely a time to rush when it comes to strategy.
Yeah.
Rarely. And often emergencies are manufactured.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, recently we had a away day for the senior team where we reviewed all of our strategy, and we beat the strategy to death. We were as critical as possible around the strategy, but to review every aspect of it. And our end conclusion was the strategy is very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is we need to push harder and be more and double down on the strategy. That's the only, so not, but we don't need to deviate from it.
Right.
We just need to get even more committed to it. But it was still, but it was still important to just make sure we've collected enough information before you make that decision. Because so again, that's my football, my soccer, or USA soccer football teacher said, I took the 2-footed tackle. We're taking the 2-footed tackle of no return.
Okay, what is that? This is the second time you
so
said
when you tackle someone in football, you're trying to take the ball from them.
This is like the slide.
You can slide.
Yeah.
You can slide with one leg, or you can just go full in with 2 legs.
Yeah.
Now the problem with that is, if you get it wrong, you will just collide with the other person, and you'll get a red card, and you'll be taken off. But if you get it right, it's a very hard, very powerful tackle, which will take the ball away from anybody.
But getting it right is striking the ball, not the player, I assume.
Yes, yes. If you strike the player, that's a red card, and or it's a game of like martial arts or something. It's a different game then. But if you strike the ball, not the player, then it's a very hard tackle, and it's likely to succeed and achieve the objective. But if you get it wrong as well, you're now on the floor, and the person can go around you and potentially score a goal, for example. So if you go for it, it's full commitment.
Right.
And so it's the 2-footed tackle of no return.
Okay.
And that's what we need to do now. We realize that our strategy, there's a lot of noise. And again, a part of strategy is cutting out the noise.
Sure.
You mentioned Steve Jobs, and because good strategy and good product design is not about what you say yes to, it's what you say no to. It's about learning to cut out all the stuff that's not relevant to your strategy.
Right.
And also understanding that there's many ways to build a successful company. Do the one that makes sense for you, and master and focus on that. And we have realized what that is. It's exciting. It's incredible vision. It's incredible opportunity. It's an honor to be able to work on this with the people that I work with. And so we're going to really, really go for it now. And that's exciting, because it's like stage rockets taking you to the moon or beyond. And we had the first stage rocket of the invention of Fedimint, then the second of forming the company and raising our seed. And the first stage rocket was removed, and that's where we raised 21. And then more recently, when we launched, now we're going to have the next set of stage rockets over the coming months, and we're really excited about that.
That's very, very cool. Okay, so I would assume that, because it sounds like obviously philosophy is the first thing you're focused on as a business, but that directly informs the strategy. It's almost like you're, I don't know, you are synthesizing the strategy out of the philosophy, but that would require a lot of information about the ecosystem in which you're competing. Does this get, I mean, we've talked a lot about Bitcoin and all the adjacent technologies and higher order protocols on Bitcoin, but does this get larger into the sphere of broader crypto assets, other blockchains, other consensus protocols? Even like, what are your views on the larger crypto asset universe or other blockchains, and does that feed into your strategy as a company?
So yeah, it does. I actually spend a lot of time looking at and analyzing the broader crypto market.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to, there's a lot of people who just say, look, I'm just going to look at Bitcoin and nothing else, which is fine. And then there's people who say, I want to, be involved in and invest in all cryptocurrencies. I came to a conclusion a long time ago, after spending a lot of time analyzing multiple cryptocurrencies as they were coming out and becoming popular, because I've been in the space for a long time, that the vast majority of economic value will be stored on and transacted in Bitcoin. And this started becoming clear in 2014 for me. And I talked about it quite a lot in 2017, 2018. When I was running my previous company, I wrote a number of blog posts around this, etc. And then I started stopping because I realized that for most people, they won't realize this. They either have realized it or they won't realize it until it's sort of obvious.
Right.
So
some necessity is at the door.
Yeah. So you're not going to convince, if you either don't need to convince or you're not going to convince most, and you should just work. But having this insight, you should work with that insight in mind. But that being the case, one of the things, there are many aspects of this, but one of the things I've looked at is the fact that, for example, even with the fact that Bitcoin has no advertising marketing team, and these others have raised billions of dollars in ICO money, and they use that money to market and advertise themselves.
And often even to disparage Bitcoin.
And to disparage Bitcoin. If you ignore the noise and look at dominance, as it's referred to, Bitcoin's dominance continues to increase inexorably over the years. What this is telling you is that this has a level of traction which is unassailable. If you're spending zero to market it and it's still gaining ground, and the others are spending billions and they're losing ground. Now, if as someone who is not zooming out and just looking at the numbers and is just looking at the messaging, and they're in a Twitter bubble or whatever, it might be confusing or for many years, it was not easy to see this. Yeah. It was easy to see if you looked in the right places, but people would try to convince people to look in the wrong places, and so it wasn't easy to see. But it was clear to me at some point it will start to become clearer that this was the case. And there are many reasons, but it's network effects, the fixed supply versus non-fixed supply, and many other reasons why the really strong brand, that's the reason why Bitcoin would inexorably win. So one thing I try to think about is, how long will this take to happen? And what will be the signs that this is happening? And what do we need to do as in the Bitcoin community to be ready for when this happens? So starting with the last, what needs to do is we need to provide mechanisms for people to come over and use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, not just as a store of value, or add additional functionality or expressivity as and where needed, if needed, at that point in time, so that when people come across, we're ready to support those use cases. But the question is, how long do we have to do that? I think we still have a quite significant amount of time to do that, but you can look at the signs. It's not going to be a date. It's going to be a certain set of realizations that people are having. And that's when you know that it's coming close. And so the realizations will be when a number of statements made about Bitcoin that are commonly understood but are actually inaccurate start being questioned, and people start realizing that they were all along lies or inaccuracies. And in a number of things that were stated as accuracies about these alternative systems, the opposite happens. People start questioning these within those communities, not out, because the Bitcoin community has questioned these for a while, and you're just labeled a maxi if you just state these things which you believe are just rational, logical statements. So what's more powerful is when these communities themselves start to realize their inaccuracies about their own protocols and realize the accuracies about the Bitcoin protocol. And so that I theorize that will be the point when that the transition is about to happen. And so I'm constantly reviewing other cryptocurrencies, not because I'm interested in investing them, but I'm looking for signs of
that moment,
of these moments.
Yeah.
You know, the four horsemen, as it were, of the crypto apocalypse, where the people then just realize, because once the penny drops, the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
Then the transition will be it'll be slowly, then all at once.
Yes.
And you are starting to, over the last year, there were multiple instances of this happening. So, for example, people are seeing a race to the bottom in terms of cryptocurrencies. They said it, so it was if you went back a few years, there was a view that the more cryptocurrencies, the better, and we want this multi-chain future. Now, probably the lead contender in people's minds for Bitcoin's throne is Ethereum, and they were the biggest proponents for this multi-chain future. It shouldn't be just about one blockchain, not just about Bitcoin, but also not just about Ethereum. Now their view is, for a few years, was that actually no, this view is actually not good for us to have, and they believe that everything should be based off Ethereum, and you should have what they call roll-ups that build on top of Ethereum, and you have this roll-up centric future with Ethereum being the base money for everything, which is a marked contrast to the language they had before.
And this is not the first time they've changed their narrative either.
Oh, it's not the first time, but it's the change of narrative is moving in a direction towards this inevitable emperor has no clothes situation. The problem with that is, now that they've shown that, and they were the leaders of the multi-chain future, who is the new proponent for this multi-chain future? They're all significantly smaller blockchains with much less credibility. So if the lead has said, I don't believe in that, the mantle falls to the second. But the second place after Ethereum nowadays would be Solana, and they also don't believe in the multi-chain future. So all of them now think that there's going to be there'll be multiple cryptocurrencies, but they will be the first amongst equal. It won't be just this sort of set of this sort of sea of different cryptocurrencies. So that's a significant change. Another big change we're seeing is the challenges of finding a use case. Now, all along, we said the use case for cryptocurrency is money. You know,
it's been gambling devices.
No, but the original solution is money. So you want it to be a store of value, a medium of exchange, and eventually a unit of account.
Yeah.
Although, funnily, when you're dealing with the most disempowered communities, it's the other way around. They value most a unit of account, then a medium of exchange, and then a store of value, because they have no value to store.
Short time horizon.
Well, they have no value to store. If you live hand to mouth, the store of value only comes when you have disposable income. Yeah. It is the most powerful use case of money. Yeah. But only for people who have disposable income. Right. If you have none, then you don't have the luxury to have a store of value. Right. So then you're living now hand to mouth, so you're constantly thinking about the price of everything.
The accounting needs to be right.
So so it's actually the polar opposite. Yeah. It's the unit of account, then medium of exchange, because you're spending money far more frequently. And then you wistfully now and again wish you have money to be
Sure.
able to store, but you don't have it, so you're not spending.
That's a trip to me, because what makes money the ideal store of value is a fixed supply asset or fixed supply money like Bitcoin, but that also gives it very clear price signals, you know? So it's like, I see what you're saying, but it's hard to have very clear pricing without the store value function working. Because if the private property is not strong at the store value functional layer, then your pricing is not going to be
Over the
good.
long term, but over the short term, remember, if you're holding
Sure.
it for a day,
Yeah.
then
Purchasing
then,
power, yeah.
then you. So this is
where you get into the dollar Bitcoin thing too, where the dollar's purchasing price stable in the short run, unstable long run, and Bitcoin's the reverse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was. I mean, we could definitely go for a segue. But that was another realization for me that the world is split into people who have disposable income and not.
Yeah.
And if you've got disposable income, then absolutely, number one use case for money is store of value.
Mm-hmm.
And number two is medium of exchange. You think about it. If you've got disposable income, how much of your time are you spending thinking about, do I invest in stocks and real estate and or Bitcoin? And then once you do make those investments, how often are you tracking the price and so on? These are all thinking about it as a store of value. For most of your month, when you think about money or value, you're thinking about it from a storing of value in different buckets and so on. And then you will think about it as a medium of exchange, second most, but significantly less when I come to buy something and I go to the supermarket and buy and pay. But I'm in the West and I have multiple different payment mechanisms that are very sophisticated. So my experience of using it as a medium of exchange, probably over the period of the entire month, is like 20 minutes, 10 minutes.
Right.
Because there's a series of tap to pay or credit card transactions, which each one is a few seconds long, probably a total of 5 minutes actually using it as a medium of exchange. And then for most things, again, if you have a significant store of value and wealth, you probably don't even think about the price of things. If we're buying a cup of coffee from a store, you eat at home a lot, but let's just say you bought something from the supermarket and the meat. Do you remember the exact price you pay for the meat? Or
No. We have
as long as
our groceries delivered, and it's too high, but we just order.
Yeah, but if you're not going to look at the exact breakdown. I mean, as long as you just put them in the basket, you'll look at the number of zeros, basically. Maybe, or the rough idea. If it's like, if the amount is somewhere, but if you're expecting it to be around, you're going to say 50 to 100. And if it's 500, then you're going to check the exact prices. What the hell happened there? But if it's 110 or it's 40, you have the luxury of you're not going to look at the actual unit price. So, i.e., you're not spending any time looking at it as a unit of account. Then
the past few years have been a little confusing on this front. Inflation.
You have inflation. And then you check. And then but the moment you're checking, that's the only point in the month that you're thinking of as a unit of account. Now, switch it the other way around. Let's say you have no disposable income. You live hand to mouth, which is hundreds of millions of people on the planet.
You get the money, you spend it.
How much time are you spending thinking about it as thinking about money as a store of value? Zero, because you have no money to store.
That's right.
So it's actually zero on that. How much time do you spend thinking about it as a medium exchange? Quite a lot compared to someone in the West, because you don't have the fancy tap to pay, Apple Pay. It's paying with cash. So now if I want to buy something in the shop, I have to go get my cash physically, pick it up, walk to a place, pay, count it out, receive the payment back, and walk back. So that transaction, which you can do online in a second, now takes you 2 hours. So it's still so now using medium of exchange, your money as medium of exchange, is taking you several hours a month, maybe even if you add up the total time spent on buying things compared to the minutes. So that's the second. And then finally, you're living hand to mouth, so you have to really account. So you're constantly looking at prices. A slight change could affect your accounts. So you're spending your time thinking about the price of things all the time. quite a lot of time thinking about it as a medium of exchange, because medium of exchange is slower, and then almost no time as unit of account. So it's not like this subtle difference. It's like one way or the other.
Yeah.
And the big difference, the moment you start saving, it switches. It's a bit like, the pole and the magnet, and it switches around. And as soon as you start building savings, also that becomes a priority.
Yeah.
Then you can start affording better mechanisms for payment. So you spend less time thinking about payment. And then eventually you start spending less and less time thinking about the cost of things.
It's occurring to me that you're framing this as disposable income that determines the flip of that, but also the inflation, right? That the lower inflation is, well, the more adequately you can store value into the future. But the higher it is, the more focused you are on just the unit of account, right? I got to get dollars in, got to get the dollars out quickly to get the goods or services.
I would say, I think they're related. I think that inflation leads to you
no disposable income.
You losing disposable income.
Yeah, of course.
But if you have inflation, but you have a ton of disposable income,
you'll be okay.
You can still be okay.
Yeah.
So it's the point. As soon as you go, the flip, the sort of the polar flip of the magnet comes from, do you have disposable income or not? And the disposable income could be false disposable income through debt as well. Yeah. But you could have debt to still give you the appearance of disposable income. But the moment you have
calling it free cash flow at that point.
Free cash flow might be a better way of putting it. The moment you have free cash flow, you think about money in one way.
Yeah.
And because we're in the West, most of the people around, and I count myself to be lucky enough to have some free cash flow. And so you'll tend to have friends around you who also have free cash flow. Then all the people we interact with will be, that we know and interact with, will tend to have that, different amounts of it, but they'll have that. So they will all perceive money in the medium store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. But if you're in another part of the world where everybody around you has no free cash flow, they'll all perceive money the exact opposite way. And what's happening is, these people who perceive cash in that way are the people who can benefit a huge amount from Bitcoin as a improved medium of exchange over their current mechanisms, saving them more time. And with that time, they can, and cost, with that time and cost savings, because time is also money, they can start building up disposable and also have less of it taken away due to inflation.
Yeah.
And that can allow them to flip and all of a sudden start seeing the world in terms of store of value first and building wealth.
And then their time preference comes
and
down.
So even though we all need this, the recognition of the need is way higher here. Yeah. But the problem is the people who often understand it, even within the same country, because there are people who have no disposable income in the US and Europe, and there are people who are incredibly wealthy in Africa, LATAM, and Southeast Asia, but they still live in different worlds. So even in the same country, they just don't see each other, and so they have. So one side has the ability to and has the access to this technology to be able to provide a solution to the other, but they don't see the other, not through purpose. It's just because the concept of how they treat money is so different. Yeah. So it's just almost like the ships in the night. Yeah. And one of the realizations for us, the very humbling realization when we started Fedi and started working with these communities, is we came in with this store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account mindset, which is true. They're both true, depending on your free cash flow. Yeah. And you started realizing that it wasn't working here until we had the humility to sort of see what was happening on the ground. And that's where we realized that actually the concept of the way money was thought about was just very different. Yeah. And we have to build solutions to support that. And then they actually leads to an app that we wouldn't have built if we hadn't had that context. So it's being part of these two worlds that has allowed us to lead it to create something like Fedi.
That's so good. And then obviously there's a direct bearing on time preference there, right? People, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, people that were working just as hard in a different part of the world still couldn't make the same gains as people working, as hard. And I guess you were going between Nigeria and London, is that what it was?
But it's not even different parts of the world. It's different parts of the economic spectrum. Because it could be in the same country.
Sure. So different parts of the economic spectrum. And it just, you can't help but think that way about it because, again, it's necessity, right? But then with that necessity comes the increasing of your time preference, and then the increasing of your time preference causes all kinds of problems. Whereas if you just give people kind of these, I don't know if you want to call these normal conditions, favorable economic conditions, they can be pragmatic, accumulate savings, lower their time preference, and like build a good life for themselves.
Yeah, and so you don't need to, and the way you give them favorable conditions is just giving them a technology that allows them to
be free.
To be freer and use their resources more efficiently and be able to invest in effectively their money becomes a very strong investment.
Yes.
And so, and technologies like the Lightning Network allow you to transfer it more quickly at lower cost, saving you money, and so does eCash as well, saving you money, saving you time.
Yeah.
Both of those translate into having free cash flow.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about free cash flow is even if you're starting from a very low base, because of the power of compounding,
yes, I was just going to go
grows
there.
and grows and grows. So you just need to give it a tiny start doing what they currently do, but this is where the catalyst comes. Plus the fact that the money that's left over is being held in a hard money.
Yeah,
and just that compounding start to
the flywheel effect
to lead to the flywheel effect, and that's what's really exciting.
Yeah, the free cash flow too. We could further decompose that into like active versus passive, and if the capital, if the conditions of the economy are favorable, and you can participate in capital markets and capital investment, you can get more and more passive free cash flow. Yeah. So and that can compound as well.
Bitcoin is passive growth in asset value.
Yeah, you're basically participating in everyone else's successful economic project, right? As they bring something to the market that increases productivity, that accretes to your savings as purchasing power.
Yeah, and so you don't have to be active about it, which means that you've got, which gives you more bandwidth to continue to work on, as opposed to being distracted. You can just continue to do what you're doing. Yeah, but passively building a value in a hard money asset, building free cash flow.
This is that beautiful thing about Bitcoin where it synthesizes selfishness and selflessness in a way. It's like, obviously you're helping yourself saving in this, but you're also helping everyone else. Hoppe talks about if you, as a saver, you're actually lowering the time preference of those around you because you have contributed to the productive output of the economy, but you haven't consumed. So you've actually increased the stock of goods and services for everyone, really, what's available. And so everyone's time preference starts to decline around a saver, and Bitcoin just throws fuel on that fire, basically.
I think Bitcoin does. And I think it's also another thing that's really interesting to understand, especially when you're dealing with some of these human rights defenders and the community they deal with, is that trade is a very powerful tool as well, where two people are exchanging goods and service for something that they both want, with something else.
The fabric of community.
And it leads to this wealth increase for both parties because both are getting something that they believe is going to lead them to be in a better place than they were before, whether it's food or money or any other exchange. But exchange requires two things. It requires some sort of money, but it also requires some sort of communication. And if either of those can be censored or stopped or are dangerous to perform, that has a negative effect on a community. And this is nowhere is this seen more than in humanitarian or especially human rights defender communities. So it's not just important to solve the money side, which is can be solved with Bitcoin, Lightning, and eCash. But it's also important to solve the side of communication as well. That needs to be decentralized, privacy preserving as well. So you see technologies like Nostr, which allow communication, and they're working on the privacy side of that. Within Fedi, we use a technology called Matrix, which is like a federated, encrypted chat service, which is a very popular service as well. There are technologies like Signal, etc., but they're centralized, unfortunately, but they are privacy preserving. But just important thing to also understand that our voice, our communication is important to maintain privacy and decentralization as well, because it's the two combined that creates trade. Yeah. If I cannot communicate with you, but I have Bitcoin, I can't trade. Yeah. If I can communicate with you, but I have no hard money, that's like a Bitcoin and so on, I can't trade. It's the two combined. I need to be able to find you, talk to you, agree with you, haggle, and then I need to transfer value. I need the two. Yeah. That was another realization we had, which is why initially it seemed like a strange idea, but now it's obvious that it's really powerful paradigm to combine money plus chat. Yeah. And then you want to be able to upgrade as well. So we always say money, chat, and more. And that's what makes a super app. That's the power. That's what leads these apps to be the most popular apps worldwide. Yeah. WeChat, Line, Kakao in Asia, and Telegram is, hitting nearly 1 billion users. Elon Musk wants to turn X.com into a super app, because when you combine all these free things into one app, the upgradability of functionality, we have Fedi mods, other people have different apps, you have mini apps in different systems, the ability to chat, communicate, and the ability to transact all in one, magic happens. The only challenge with all of them, we wouldn't be needed if these were all privacy preserving and decentralized, but none of them are. And that's the potential here to be the world's best super app. Yeah. Run by and for communities.
That's fantastic. And I think it also points to why one of the best definitions for money is the language of value. Like it is this, and it really begs a deeper philosophy of the word language, because what is language? Language is not just the spoken, mathematics is a language. You could say music is a language, money is a language. Like it's all these signaling systems, and they're all over nature and all throughout technology stacks and civilizational stacks. And it's just fascinating.
The other question is language a form of energy?
Yeah. And that's where you get to combining chat and money, as it kind of it energizes language in a way that is fascinating. I have to ask you one big concluding question, because I've kept you here for a long time, but we've talked a lot about philosophy, or that word's come up a lot, let's say. I want to know, because this is one of the most fascinating things about Bitcoin, is that it transforms people. And I don't think anyone has a really adequate explanation of why. I guess the best explanation would be time preference, right? It seems to lower your time preference, and it has all these cascading effects throughout your life, right? Your diet, who you spend time with, people getting more into fitness, people starting families, etc. How has falling into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, starting and running a Bitcoin company, well, now you're on your second one, how has Bitcoin changed your views on the world and more deeply your personal life philosophy?
I think Bitcoin has had a profound change on me, within me. I will sound like people throw around this term a maxi, but I think that when I first heard about Bitcoin, I had these views around the world and the way the world could be, but I definitely felt that I felt despondent. I didn't think it was going to be possible. And I was becoming cynical. I heard about Bitcoin. I read up on it, and a feeling came across me, and it was very hard to describe it because I'm not the best at describing my feelings, and I'm working on that actually. But over time, I realized what that feeling was, and it was hope. That there was actually something that, with a lot of effort, a lot of patience, had a chance of making a significant difference on some fundamental things in the world. And that sense of hope grew because I'm an engineer, analytical mindset. I wanted to test and test and test. And every time, and observe when Bitcoin was tested, and every time I observed, it became stronger, it became better, and it became clearer that this was something very different. It then brought me to the realization that it's not just Fedi, it's not just Bitcoin, but there are other technologies out there. The phrase is freedom technologies that can help improve our lot and our world. But then I started to realize that I was changing. I started to realize that one of the most powerful freedom technologies was not just our community, but our own minds and ourselves. And more recently, I finally got to the point where I started to think about myself and think about how, just like we're trying to improve Bitcoin and Lightning and all these others, what can I do to improve myself? And there's a long way to go. There's a long way to go. It needs a lot of optimization if we're going to stretch this analogy. But that realization has been incredibly freeing for me. I'm working to understand myself, improve myself, and I realize that this will take several lifetimes, and I plan to live a long time to be able to solve. And so I know that this is an objective that won't be completed anytime soon. It will never be completed. But one of the lessons that I've already learned is that the journey itself is part of the reward, and it should be enjoyed. And the experience of going through that journey is a blessing. This is very far removed from hard money, but I can track back this thought process through time. And it's gone through stages. But one of the key parts was having this exemplar in the form of Bitcoin. This money in a sea of weak monies that have incentives which are not very aligned and can lead to a sense of hopelessness. And this hopeful money appearing, and the thought process, the sense of hope that they gave me. And then realizing and seeing the synergies between this money and myself as a human being, and how I could also go through that process and be hope for myself and hopefully hope for other people. So it's been very profound, and I'm enjoying the experience. I'm grateful for the experience. And yeah, I don't care how it sounds to others. I know it's powerful, and I'm excited to see where it progresses over the coming years.
That's beautifully said. Interesting that you chose the word exemplar. You know, that the somehow Bitcoin can be an exemplar for us to level up. And I've been beating this drum. I thought it was interesting that, it's BTC is the acronym for Bitcoin. So be the change kind of thing. Like, just whatever it is you don't like about the world, well, become the thing that you would rather it be. And not that you're going to save the world doing that alone, but if everyone adopts that philosophy over a long enough period of time, I mean, that's how you do it.
Yep.
And
And if
so,
they don't, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
I heard something the other day about love, for example. And a lot of people say that they're in love, and what they're actually saying is someone loves them,
Mhm.
and they're feeling the experience of someone else's love,
Mhm.
and that's an enjoyable experience. But love, true love, is actually the giving of that feeling to someone else.
Mhm.
It's not the receiving, it's the giving.
Mhm.
That's true love, and with the expectation of nothing in return.
Mhm.
So you should just
Unconditional.
it's that if it's conditional,
Mhm.
then it's not love.
Right.
By definition. So unconditional love is a bit of a truism.
Yes.
And it's like a parent for a child
Yes.
is
Yeah.
true love, because the child is screaming and wetting there's urinating on your
Yes.
face when you lift them up.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You love them no matter what.
Agape.
And that is love.
Yeah.
It's the giving that
Yeah.
is love. And whereas the child has no choice, because but they're dependent. But you, as the parent, love them no matter what. And I think it's when you say be the change,
Mhm.
you should be the change because you want to be the change, and not conditionally based on the fact that other people will follow that, and they're very likely to see you as an exemplar
Mhm.
and wish to follow. But if they do or don't,
Right.
doesn't matter. You
That's
should
right.
do what you need to do.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if people follow you or not, or agree with you or not.
Yes.
Another example is like the sun. The sun gives love to every living thing on this planet.
Yeah.
But it doesn't expect anything in return.
Yeah.
And it's not saying, well, I'm only going to give you sunlight if you do this or that.
Yeah.
It's going to do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if you hate the sun, it's still going to just do its thing. And I'm not there yet by far, but I want to try and get to that point where I am doing what I do from a position of love, and it doesn't matter whether I get anything in return.
Yes.
And that's why I will, and it can take a lifetime to get to that point, but I want to try.
That's beautiful. Yeah, the ancient Greeks called that agape.
Oh.
And that's what Christ was an exemplar of, actually. So I can't help but wonder, you said you had that peaceful feeling when you return home, when there's that giant Christ statue that,
oh yeah,
maybe Bitcoin's teaching us something about that, the importance of being exemplary, so like, I don't try to make these things religious necessarily. I look at it from more of a standpoint of just having a role model, someone to imitate. Could be Buddha, could be Christ, could be, there's several. Could be somewhat more recent historical figure like a Gandhi, just someone that promoted human freedom, promoted love, and how important that is. That we need someone to set the example, to set the tone, to do the thing.
And we can be that person.
Yeah.
And for ourselves, and hopefully for others. I'm fortunate enough to have, and again, another thing that Bitcoin has given me is a number of people who I think are incredible role models. It attracts,
for sure,
people who I believe can be incredible role models.
Yeah.
And I've found many of them.
Yeah.
And that's also been part of this process, because it's helped me. When you're surrounded by these exemplars, you think, okay, wow, I can try harder, I can do more, and I'm really grateful for that, because I was in a previous life, I was working in organizations where the exemplars there, well, the exemplars are wrong, well, the examples there, could have very easily led me to a number of habits or behaviors, which now I find the thought of having those behaviors very unappealing.
Yes.
Again, to each their own, but for me, I'm very grateful for what I have, and I will continue to try to do my best to improve myself and share the benefits that I've gained from Bitcoin, philosophically and emotionally, with others.
Well, thank you for doing what you do, and it does shine a light out into the world, and it's amplified by the organization that you're creating, right? You're creating tools for freedom lovers, freedom fighters, truth seekers. Seems like a very noble effort. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, matey.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.